All right, technology, we're good to go. All right, trustees, let's do another 10 seconds. And a kind reminder about yellow cards. Please, if you are here to speak on an item, please make sure you fill out your yellow cards and hand them to our amazing staff off to the left here. Okay. With that, I would like to welcome everyone today. I am President Irene Cepeda, and I'd like to call this regular board meeting of December 8th, 2022 to order. The time is 5:01. Kind reminder to please silence your electronic devices. And before we get going here, we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather here today is territorial homelands of the Nuwu, the Moapa Band of Paiutes, and the Las Vegas Band of Paiutes. We have the El Dorado High School ROTC here. Please stand. You may all be seated. Thank you again to the El Dorado High School ROTC. Cadet Seaman Recruit Diego Garcia, Cadet Seaman Apprentice Andrea Morales, Cadet Seaman Recruit Kyla Herman, Cadet Seaman Apprentice Ana Lucia Villalobos, and Master Chief Russ Faje, United States Navy retired Naval Science Instructor. Okay. We're moving on to 1.02, adoption of the agenda. Trustee Ford.
Madam President, members of the board, I would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda with the following changes. Additional reference material is provided for item 4.01, appointment to the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association Board of Control.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. Trustee Guzman.
I second.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Ford and a second by Trustee Guzman. Please cast your votes. Beautiful. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. We're moving on to the consent agenda item. Before we fully open this item, if you'd like to speak on the consent agenda, please. All right, folks, I'm managing some papers. Please do so. I do not see any yellow cards or folks who have signed up ahead of time. Yep, there's one. Okay. Ms. Binder?
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jura, Anna Binder for the record. I can't even keep track of how much crap is crammed into this consent agenda for the last meeting of the year. I want to start with a continuation of an issue I brought up at yesterday's work session. We're getting ready to invest a lot of money for the summer acceleration program again. None of that money accounts for any type of compensatory education for special education. ESY is also not a vessel for compensatory education. And, you know, in the 2 years that schools have been open since the pandemic, we haven't addressed that. I'll give a nice reminder that the Department of Justice across the country has been looking at larger districts and the failure of federally protected services being provided to our special education children, and kind of look forward in 2023 for maybe some of that investment. However, I'm looking at the final budget. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. But I think 4.03 is its own thing, so I'll come back to that. Something a couple parents brought to my attention as we're granting this expansion of the K-12 virtual learning in a charter is potentially exploring the MBLE students and or these virtual students being able to attend CTE classes at their local magnet school. There's really no reason with the abundance of resources we provide to our students for CTE classes that our virtual learning children would be precluded from those. So that's a conversation I would like to have in the future. 1 minute. Also, I am always very grateful for the summer acceleration programs. They have benefited the children a lot. I think this past summer, I spoke very highly of the program at my son's middle school. It was instrumental for him, especially since he was really a student who needed that social emotional learning and would continue to this year. However, I would like us to try to keep focus on student success, getting our SPED kids back up. Especially as we're venturing into a time where we have, a bunch of seniors being told they're credit deficient on a computer class from 5 years ago right now. So that's something we're going to talk about in January. I will bring that back up. So we'll move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. That is all I have for folks on the consent agenda. Trustees. Trustee Guzman.
I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. Trustee Williams.
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Guzman and a second by Trustee Williams. Please cast your votes. All right. Motion passes 6-1-0. Noting I have to abstain as one of the items is connected to Nevada State College. And I should have said that before our vote, but that is why. All right, trustees, we're moving on to item 3.01. Oh, apologies. Trustee Brooks, can you please read the warrants?
Thank you, President Cepeda. Ratified warrants as listed in the bills payable, transmittal, and board memorandum number 09-22-23 in the total amount of $185,947,105.25.
Thank you, Trustee Brooks. We're moving on to agenda item 3.01, formative board reports and updates. We have a career and technical education IB and advanced placement presentation by Dr. Barton and his team. Thank you all for being here. Just note that this is not an action item, so I will be tossing this to Dr. Barton.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara. This evening, we are providing a presentation, Focus 2024, related to the strategic plan on metrics and strategies related to CTE, International Baccalaureate, and advanced placement. This aligns to our strategic plan in the access and equity area under student success, and always familiarizing the public with what the strategic plan is and what the components are. As a refresher for the board and the general public, we've provided previous board presentations on this data previously on November 14th, 2019, and also December 12th, 2019. It was part of a bigger, larger student achievement presentation. So tonight it's dedicated to these three topics that you see before you. So starting with a theory of action around these three topics, our original theory of action, again, because we're going to have a revised theory of action to the board at the end of the presentation. If we enroll students in earlier advanced coursework and begin CTE awareness in earlier grade levels, then student preparedness for advanced coursework will be accelerated and CTE completion rates will increase in high school. Again, we'll revisit that theory of action as we've done our work in implementing new strategies to move these numbers in the right direction. Also, as a refresher, trustees, what are the strategies that are already built into the Focus 2024 plan? And, I won't go in detail on all of these, but they're all happening. And I'll just call out a couple of them. Expand dual credit opportunities aligned to career and technical education has happened aggressively in the last couple of years, even in the midst of a pandemic. Academic planning is a requirement. through legislation where we have academic plan requirements for freshmen. And then I'll call out one last one that we've done. And again, some shifting has happened in this area, and Ms. Moore will provide detail. But looking at our CTE pathways starting at earlier grade levels, so giving middle school opportunities for CTE, which again was started a couple of years ago, and consolidating offerings or pathway offerings at level 1. You'll hear some information tonight that changes sort of the original Focus 2024. We had level 1, level 2, and level 3 for CTE. There's been some shifting with that. So we'll go over that as we're going over the metrics with CTE. And again, that was a state decision to benefit kids for CTE pathways and opportunity and access. So, Madam President, with your permission, I'll pivot to Ms. Moore.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Barton.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. G. Moore for the record. As Dr. Barton had mentioned, there have been some significant changes since our target was originally set. This data point actually is referring to the enrollment in high skill and high demand programs of study. And so since this target was initially set, a significant amount of changes have been made in terms of programs that qualify for a high skill, high demand, high wage program. The pandemic, as we know, certainly exposed a lot of our vulnerabilities, not only in education, but particularly in our economy. We knew that we found where our Achilles was in terms of our business industry areas, and therefore that had a great impact on how we shifted on what we deem as high skill, high wage, high demand. And again, as Dr. Barton had alluded to, the Nevada Department of Education has instituted a change in CTE programs of study from a 3-year sequence to a 2-year sequence. This phase-in and phase-out process began a couple of years ago, actually, and will continue over the next few years. So we believe that these changes are very positive and will allow for more opportunities for students to complete programs of study in the realm of CTE and or engage in more extensive training, work-based learning, dual enrollment opportunities. So we think it's a very positive thing for our students, particularly our juniors, which seems to be always that pivotal year where a lot of things start to click. Before, under the old 3-year sequence, they did not have an opportunity to complete a program of study, and now they do, and we think that's a very positive move for our students. It's important to also emphasize that a lot of the programs that were once deemed as high skill, high wage, as I mentioned before, since the original target was set, are no longer deemed as that. So for example, photography, where we had hundreds of enrollments, that is no longer a CTE program of study, nor is it deemed as high skill, high wage, high demand. And also many of our programs are being consolidated. So for example, our furniture and cabinet making program has been morphed into our construction technology program. So and lastly, some of the programs have also been eliminated. So our interior design program will now move to a complementary program with our design drafting. So our next data set here illustrates the enrollment by female students in level 2 career and technical education programs, and really shows that we've either exceeded or met our targets with the exception of a very slight decline in our white female students. We will continue to host our targeted engagement activities for these students to ensure awareness of career pathways and to spark interest, particularly where they are the most underrepresented in career pathways such as architecture, automotive, construction, those fields. So we'll continue to do those events such as our Girls in Tech, Girls in STEM, and we've been really able to shift enrollment to have it a little more balanced in those areas as a result of those efforts over the years. Next illustrates our level 2 enrollment by male students that either again met or exceeded with a slight decline in African-American male students. While there are many factors that influence whether or not a student continues from a level 1 to a level 2, such as student loses interest, maybe perhaps we don't have a teacher in that area, maybe they need to make room to address deficiencies in their credits and their schedule. There's lots of reasons why, but we are doing some extensive work here that I'll talk about in a little bit, where we need to have more deliberate systems in place and how we expose students to what those options are once they do get to high school. Similar to the previous data tables, this is enrollment of our female students in level 3 career technical education programs. And again, we either met or exceeded enrollment in all of these subgroups. So very positive movement. Next, again, either met or exceeded in level 3 enrollment by male students with a slight decline in African American males completing a program of study. And as mentioned, there are a lot of variables why this might be the case, but we believe that in providing schools with the necessary tools to be able to properly onboard students, to expose them to the opportunities and experiences that can help them make an informed decision, that will start to change, not only for these students, but all of our students. Next is our completion rate. So this is the completion rate of our level 3 career and technical education programs. I think it's important to emphasize that the students that are in that 47% were the students that were able to endure career and technical education during a pandemic. It's very difficult to engage in automotive class during distance learning. So these students definitely endured. And if we're looking at this from a national perspective, we're really pretty much in alignment with where other districts are. As a matter of fact, the average, I know that is put out there, the average number is usually around 30% completion rate. We really think that moving to 2-year pathways, this will increase significantly. But again, I think we're making great strides in terms of our students. 60% of all CCSD students are enrolled in a CTE pathway. That's very significant that they have access to those options. So for some additional perspective, again, that national average is around 30%. And then our pass rates among programs, I think, is important to emphasize as well. So some of our pass rates for our programs are around 90%, whereas we have 30% pass rates in some others. So for our engineering program, it might be around 90%, where our culinary arts programs are around 30%. And then finally, to reiterate, we're currently in that transition from 3-year to 2-year pathways. I think we'll see some significant differences there. So in terms of our challenges, successes, our lessons learned, oftentimes I think it's important to change our vocabulary about how we talk about career and technical education programs. They're usually deemed as electives. So when we talk about them in those terms and not talking about them as career pathways, students have a very different attitude towards them. So I think with that is that we need to make sure that we're strategically putting students, as I mentioned before, in these career pathways and to ensure that all students have access to that. We have, in terms of our successes, strong partnerships with business and industry. So for example, we have a great partnership with our Nevada Gold Mines program. So students that complete our industrial maintenance or diesel technology programs in conjunction with the College of Southern Nevada basically have a job lined up prior to graduating from high school and very lucrative careers. So those are some great strides that we're making. Again, and as lessons learned, I think the more deliberate monitoring and guidance tools that we develop, and right now we're working with schools individually and helping them develop their master schedules and how they're engaging with their feeder alignment. We're going to see a great shift, but definitely lessons learned in terms of we need to strategically work with schools to help them with these goals. Shifting gears just a little bit to discuss our International Baccalaureate program. So it is a highly rigorous college preparatory program, college and career preparatory program, and students in grades 11 and 12 engage in the diploma program at 5 of our high schools in the Clark County School District. As part of that diploma program, students engage in, they must take 6 academic courses throughout that time, which include a language, world language. They also need to take an experimental science sort of course, so 6 different courses. And then students need to earn on that diploma program at least 24 out of the 45 possible points on those examinations, in addition to completing a community service project and then also enrolling in a theory of knowledge course. So very extensive process for a student to be able to complete that. We're looking at comparatively our student comparatively, our awards, diploma awards, are lower than comparative districts that were able to share data with us. However, just for some perspective, Washoe County, for an example, has one diploma program at one of their high schools, and then Miami has an enhanced criteria that's required for students to be able to enter into those programs. So all different kind of entry points across the country in terms of how they run their IB programs. We are under the belief, as well as the IB puts this information out too, is that IB is for all students, and so we're of that belief and believe that all students should have access to those programs. In terms of our challenges with IB, I think it's important to ensure that students not only have access to rigorous coursework, but that they also have the appropriate supports in place in order to ensure that they're successful in these rigorous courses. For our successes, we're continuing to increase opportunities for students to participate in IB programs. We've grown that program exponentially since 2014, when we greatly expanded that from just a few schools to over 11 schools. And then finally, our lessons learned are that we need to be more deliberate by ensuring that our IB educators have ongoing professional learning that's beyond just what's required for their authorization from the IB. So for example, all of our IB teachers at an elementary primary years program for the IB, all of them are required to go through IB training in order to be an authorized school. We're saying that this needs to be continued work as well as collaborative work with other schools in order to make sure that we are implementing this program with fidelity and that we're consistent across the district. So, and with that, Madam President, with your permission, I would like to turn over the next part of our presentation to discuss our AP data with Ms. Jennifer Lyle.
Yes, please. Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Jennifer Lyle for the record. I am excited to be able to give you an update on our advanced placement program. It's been a minute since we've been able to present on this. As you are aware, our AP program is one of our college readiness opportunities for our high school students. They're able to engage in college level coursework while they are still in high school with us, ending with a national assessment annually in May, where students have the opportunity to score a qualifying score of 3, 4, or 5, in which they can earn college credit at nearly every college and university across the country. So as we look at the health of the program, we tend to look at a couple of metrics, namely participation in the coursework, as well as participation in the exams and our student performance on that national assessment. So for our first metric here, this is looking at our course enrollment. So these are students actively enrolled in an AP course right now this school year. We have 17,759 students sitting in an AP course. Those are unique students, which is a pretty good percentage of our high school population. Although we are meeting or coming very close to meeting most of our subgroups, we still have some work to do increasing access for our Hispanic and our Black students. I will say that during the pandemic, our AP program, both in our district and nationally, was a very hard course to get our students and our families to engage in. It was very difficult learning to begin with during distance learning, and so especially for our most underrepresented students, not having potentially supports at home and asking them to take honors and advanced placement courses was a little bit of a stretch. So we are still regaining our numbers from the pandemic. We have seen increases overall, but the initial target for this was obviously set pre-pandemic. For our next metric, we are looking at our exam participation. So now we're looking at our numbers from last school year as the exam is administered in May. These are students who sat in one of our AP classrooms and passed the aligned AP exam. So this was in May of 2022. As you can see, although we fell short of our initial metric, we still had 12,473 students pass an AP exam last year, which is a potential savings of more than $6 million in college tuition for students just within the state of Nevada. So that is really something to celebrate, that these students are performing. I also want to note that in comparison to the participation slide we just looked at, this is exam performance. And if you'll notice, the subgroups that we are excelling in are underrepresented students. So we know that as we strive to both increase participation as well as performance, we have to simultaneously make sure that we're maintaining the fidelity of the program. We are very, very fortunate that you as a board have been able to support our AP Summer Institute, which allows all of our AP teachers to attend annually a 4-day training that's led by College Board instructors for $35, where it's usually a $1,000 training to go out of state. We're the only APSI in the state of Nevada, so it is one of our greatest successes we're able to offer. So we know that as we increase numbers, we just need to be very mindful of that and continue to be able to offer our teachers support. For our next metric, and in alignment with District Regulation 5127, we expect that students who are enrolled in an AP course also participate in the AP examination. So this is a comparison of the students who took an AP exam compared to the total enrollment in AP courses for last school year. Now, as you'll see, we did not meet our target. We were just under 79% of actual participation. We know that there's a number of factors that might determine whether a student ends up sitting for an exam, but we also know and believe that one of the primary burdens on our families continues to be that financial cost of a $100 exam, which they hope they get credit, but they don't necessarily know, and that's where they tend to have a little bit less confidence in the end. So we are grateful for the board tonight for passing that we will now be paying for AP exams for all of our students using our federal grants. So we anticipate that this number will increase significantly next year and in the future by being able to shift that burden back onto the district. Comparing our district to other districts is a little bit more difficult. Most districts do not publicize that data. However, we are able to obtain state-level data directly from the College Board in terms of exam participation and performance. So for this first comparison, we're looking at performance level data, so the percent of students who are passing an AP exam, comparing our district to states with similar demographics. As you can see, largely, we have very similar trends. Now, this goes back to 2021, as the College Board has not yet released national data for last school year, but we are very, very similar in terms of how we were showing slight increases with a pretty significant decrease in that year of 2021. Now, as we look at participation comparison, this is significantly more difficult to compare statewide to other states. Just the sheer size of California alone makes it not a valid comparison when we look at the two programs. In addition to that, we also have varying statewide policies. So as a whole, Clark County and Nevada have different state policies for their AP program as from other states. Florida, for example, offers several financial incentives, but one of which they give FTE allocations to schools for every student who passes an AP exam. In addition, Florida and Texas both offer teacher incentives for students who pass AP exams. And then Texas and Arizona actually offer student incentives to students who pass AP exams in the name of scholarships and grants to their local colleges and universities. If we're looking straight between states and Clark County School District, New Mexico is actually the most similar in terms of demographics and our actual state policies that we are currently operating under. I do want to just go back one slide for just half a minute. Despite all of those incentives that the other states are able to provide, we are still very, very highly performing with our current program. So nationally, College Board doesn't release a national pass rate per se, and it varies significantly from course to course. But overall, we have consistently performed very well on the exams that we are taking. So that is really something that we want to celebrate as a district. Now, in terms of our challenges, successes, and lessons learned with the AP program, Ms. Moore mentioned a few of them. One of our continued challenges is identifying additional students. With the expansion of our dual enrollment program, we have seen great success, great increases in those numbers. At the same time, we've seen a decrease in our AP program. So what that tells us is that we have to be very cognizant that we are not taking one group of students from one program and putting them into another program, but how do we identify additional students to be able to partake in these college opportunities? And we plan on doing that with many ways. Some are underway and some we're actively working with schools right now, as she mentioned. So one of the biggest things that we've been able to do consistently is we've been able to offer the PSAT for all students in grades 8 and in grades 10. We're able to take that data and leverage it for AP potential. So identify students who are on track to be college and career ready by the time they exit with us and be able to enter them into an advanced course. And it might not be AP right away. Not all students are ready for AP in 9th grade, but if we can identify them to get them into an honors class in 9th grade for the first time, we know that AP and dual enrollment don't happen overnight. So we're looking for opportunities to get them into any advanced course as early as possible so we can get them exposed to that rigorous curriculum and get them to start really having that confidence to be able to proceed in those courses. And with that, one of the, Ms. Moore is going to expand in just a moment, but we know that we very deliberately have to work together with AP, IB, CTE, and dual enrollment so that we very strategically are able to help all of our students with those pathways. So with your permission, Madam President, I will pass it back to Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Lyle. Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. And I think Jen certainly outlined it very well in terms of what our efforts are. And we've learned a lot over the last few years in our work and just some of the challenges that we've had and expanding on a lot of our successes. But we bring to you tonight a revised theory of action that we think better aligns with the work that we are doing. And that is if schools are better equipped to assist and support students to make informed decisions to achieve their academic goals and use tightly monitored, deliberate systems for course enrollment, as Jen mentioned, Slyle mentioned, our ad hoc reports, PSAT data, deliberate systems for course enrollment, that will certainly put in deliberate systems for course enrollment. And then that will also influence our CTE completion rates and our high skill, high demand, high wage programs of study, and then our participation in our advanced coursework. So that is our revised theory of action. And to discuss our next steps, with your permission, Madam President, I'd like to pass that over to Dr. Barton.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Dr. Barton.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara. To close out this evening, the revised theory of action is critically important because it sort of sets the stage for these next steps and the action that we're taking immediately to move these metrics that you saw tonight. First of all, you see on the timeline the master scheduling benchmark guidance. We've never really had this in the district where having times in the year where students need to be scheduled, or what do recommendations look like for students and how do you remove bias. Working in conjunction, the T&L team with TIS, we've identified a master scheduling benchmark guidance document that will operationalize when things need to be done for equity and for access. And so that's one thing that we're doing, and we've already done it. We've also, this phenomenal team up here, presented professional learning to all of our high school principals in November, and that training was well received. And it wasn't just a one-shot training. That's led to one-on-one conversations, as Ms. Moore said, including region leadership, associate superintendents, to ensure that the entire system is focused on the pathways. And the reality is that all of these pathways, best fit high school programs, CTE, AP, IB, can be for all. So it's not what Ms. Lyle said, switching from AP to dual enrollment. This is an opportunity for all students in our district. The next item on our next step timeline, expand the ad hoc reports. We provided ad hoc reports, started those about a year ago, 2 years ago, with course enrollment guides to be very strategic about data showing that students, if they have certain metrics on MAP, that they deserve that opportunity to be in that higher level class. So expanding that work that we're doing and perfecting that. The next bullet after that is a process for adding or closing CTE programs. There's been a lot of autonomy in the past on schools being able to offer or onboard new CTE programs of study. And sometimes in the past, there have been programs that have been onboarded that have been misaligned to what may be a job of the future. And so with that, we're going to ensure that the funding, usually through Perkins, that this is strategically provided only if there's alignment to high skill, high demand, and alignment to Workforce Blueprint 3.0, which is what our job prediction will be for the next 10 years in industry. Monitor student enrollment and identify gaps in rigorous coursework. That will be from January to August as we do this PL, as we have the master scheduling benchmark guidance out there for elementary and secondary schools. How do we ensure that we're monitoring that student enrollment aggressively the remainder of this year? So again, equity access for all. And then June, analyze completion data and work with schools to develop improvement plans. And then the mid-course correction does not even stop there. Even as we go into the start of the school year, as we look at ad hoc reports, course enrollment guides, the master scheduling benchmarks, ensuring that that child on day one is scheduled, they have a schedule, and that they're in that class that they deserve to be in. to show their true potential. So, Madam President, that concludes our presentation. And with your permission, I know the superintendent wants to weigh in as well.
Thank you, Dr. Barton. Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Before I make my comments, I do want to commend the team under Dr. Barton, Ms. Moore, Ms. Lau, Monica Martin, who's in the back, and Tracy Viscosi's cross-functional team, and really looking at data and analyzing. And I know that there's a lot of conversation around assessments, and this, when I say, and when this board has invested on the PSAT, it's really an opportunity for counselors, our principals, to look at data and giving kids that opportunity to accelerate their learning in more rigorous courses. The alignment that we're seeing with, and I'm glad that Dr. Bart mentioned on the Blueprint 3.0 with the LVGEA and the Chamber as the businesses are recruited and are coming. Ms. Moore and her CTE team are really looking at as quickly as possible to align our K-12. As I always say that we are, and I know that it's a common knowledge that we are the pipeline for economic development because we produce the workforce for our kids, so they're ready. We got a lot of work to do. I don't want you to think that we're happy with our results. Our principals understand there's intentionality. Our region superintendents under Dr. Larson-Mitchell's leadership is really monitoring, make sure that children who are in AP classes are taking the course. We also have CTE. We also have dual credit. We have to broaden and have more opportunities. I think the investment in eliminating that barrier, as Dr. Barton mentioned and Ms. Moore, removing that barrier, we are investing in every kid right now who's sitting in an AP class. We are paying for their exam. That is a huge barrier. That's what other states are doing. The Florida, the Texas, and that's why you see those numbers. And our kids can do it. We just got to eliminate the barriers for the family. So, really excited with the direction that this team is going, and we'll see great opportunities for our students. Thank you,
Superintendent. All right, trustees, this is your moment to ask any questions. And while folks start to put themselves in the queue, okay, this was quick. Thank you all again for this presentation. It's been since 2019 since we got an update, so it's so important to be able to monitor these student-centered outcomes. So thank you all so much for bringing this presentation. We'll toss this to our first trustee in the queue, which is Trustee Williams. Trustee Williams?
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Thank you all for this report. Super number heavy. I love it. I only have a couple questions, but one, thank you for taking the burden back off the families in order for students to test out. I know $100 doesn't seem like a lot to some people, but it is a lot to a lot of families out there. And then I had a question on one of your slides. You had said there's misconceptions about AP classes. Can you elaborate what the misconceptions are?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Jennifer Lyle for the record. One of the biggest barriers we face is there's a misconception that students don't earn credit, and it's widely accepted at over 99% of colleges and universities. We actually, Nevada passed through their NG system several years ago that any student who gets a qualifying score of 3 or higher has to receive credit at our public institutions. So, but getting that message across sometimes the many different stakeholders takes a little bit of work. So it's just trying to alleviate that piece of it and making sure that sometimes students think that they have to be the straight A student and they're not an AP student. Right. So changing the message that anyone can be an AP student and giving them that confidence, because just partaking in an AP course is helping students do better in college. Even students who don't earn a qualifying score of 1 or 2 are outperforming students who didn't take AP at all in college, and that's just decades of research that's been showing that. So it's kind of those misconceptions. Just.
Do you think your theory of action will help change that? Do you see the misconception with parents, or do you see it with students themselves, or?
It's a little bit of both. We've been working heavily with principals and with Dr. Jar mentioned Ms. Martin's office guidance and counseling, so it's making sure that they're aware of all of it. It's also part of the work with CTE. A lot of times we hear college or career ready, and we're trying to change that message that we have to help kids think a little bit. We have to say, when you're listening and you're having those academic planning with the students, if they mention a career that we know is going to require some type of college, we need to help prep them for that, because sometimes they think about the end game and not necessarily all the pieces that have to fall in place to get there. And when they change their minds several times, which is very normal, and I say this having children myself in high school right now, we just need to make them have as many opportunities, be it CTE, AP, advanced coursework, anything, so that they start having opportunities and we don't close doors. The more opportunities and resources we give them, the more options they'll have when they leave us.
Thank you. And then you said one of your other disadvantages is educator incentives. Even though we're performing well with other districts, what are your guys', I guess, proposed incentives? What are you guys started looking at that? What you're thinking? Probably a Dr. Jara question, honestly.
We'll get there, the quiet superintendent.
We would love to. In Florida and Texas, they're legislated. So the legislature invests and moves it forward in laws. We would love to have that conversation with our collective bargaining partners, but I think it's very complicated. That's why some of those states, when there was mentioned that they get a weighted FTE, it's investing back in the program. When I was there in Florida, the teachers get $50 for every kid that scores a 3, and the school gets a weighted FTE, so the exams are covered, everything. So that state, and similar in Texas, they heavily invest in some of these, and it's not just AP, it's CTE, and it's IB, all the advanced programs, and the PSAT. All of that is covered by the state legislature in those states.
We need to talk to the state legislature. Thank you guys for this report. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustee Garcia Morales.
Thank you, Madam President. In previous presentations, we have heard about teacher shortages and shortages all around on school campuses. And I know the HR recruiting team is working really hard to fill those vacancies. And if I look at the numbers, specifically pointed out the AP enrollment numbers for the Latino and Black students is not where it could be higher. It sounds like there's work that's being done to help improve those numbers. I think about those two connecting points and also just kind of putting some pieces together here and thinking, what role does teacher shortages play in offering AP courses primarily to the schools that have teacher shortages? Is that something that you can help me illuminate? Is that an issue or a concern that exists? Dr. Barton?
Dr. Barton.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara. Trustee Garcia Morales, I think it's a definite issue. We know that some decision points as far as course offerings are impacted by staffing shortages. We are, as a team, working in conjunction with HR, working with Workforce Connections, for example, on reaching out to industry to see if we can recruit teachers that are in, well, not teachers yet, but they're specialists in labor, to see if we can get them to come over and be teachers. It's a challenge. We think about some of the salaries that we see in CTE outside of teaching, and it's hard to compete. So I think the answer to the question is that it's a challenge all around as far as the shortages, and we continue to work with the principals on creative ideas to master schedule. And I know that's what the team's been doing this week, working with 5 principals yesterday, looking at their master schedule and trying to put the puzzle pieces together with this reality that you described.
Thank you for that. I can't help but to think just grateful to the board for moving the BDR forward to assess and analyze the teacher, the needs that we have as a community for sure, but certainly impact the state when it comes to the workforce. The last question that I have for you and your team is that I hear, and I'm grateful for the distinction, or at least the trying to clear up language so that we're all using consistent languages right across the entire district and our community at large around what AP college and career readiness means versus college or career readiness means. just thinking about what it looks like for a student who participates in an AP course, right? An AP course, and ideally they get a grade that's passing and they're a test score that's passing. That isn't necessarily always. Can you tell me whether that translates immediately into college admission, right? So from college credit, college admission, is there a gap that exists there? And if so, is that an issue that we're trying to address or we need to address?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Jennifer Lau for the record. I will say AP is still being used heavily by admissions officers for enrollment in colleges. So it is one of the things they look at, both AP, dual enrollment. They namely look at any high school transcript, knowing exactly what that high school offers, and if the student took as much rigorous coursework as, or some level of rigorous coursework at the school, that shows them that they are in preparation for it. Very similar to being a star athlete that is, recruited heavily by colleges for being NC2A. Students who perform well on either the PSAT or AP, just partaking in the courses makes them more attractive to a college admissions officer. So it is, especially AP, it's a national assessment. So it's a national validation of student performance in the curriculum that student was given.
Thank you. And I meant more specific. This is illuminating. Thank you for that. At the piece that I guess I'm looking for is like the technical aspect for students, right? The school may recruit the students, but the work that actually takes place between the moment that they have an interest in college, or even just an awareness that college exists, to the moment they actually are enrolled. And I know that may be a separate conversation when it comes to some of the clearinghouse data information that is that we have recently started to, that we've invested in as a school district. I'm really excited about seeing those numbers, those trends kind of overlap at some point, especially as we continue to address the needs in the Black and Latino student population. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. Trustee Guzman.
Thank you. And thank you for this presentation. Of course, I was looking at numbers. So thank you, Dr. Barton. One of the things that I am curious about when we're looking at CTE, are we talking to the unions that actually train for like apprenticeships and things like that? Are we having those conversations?
Dr. Barton.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Guzman, absolutely.
Okay.
Those conversations, I got to give great credit to Dr. Jara for that, because those probably did not occur before his tenure, but when he took this job, that was the first thing that we did to make sure those partnerships were built. They're definitely involved in the conversations, whether it's the Carpenters Union, the other locals, they're involved in this plan and work.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then you mentioned that we're doing professional learning, the IB Educator Professional Learning. Do the educators that take that, do they get CU so that they can move across on the pay scale? It's an incentive, so I'm looking at incentives.
Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Guzman. They can, depending on how we're offering it. So there's various levels of professional learning that occur. So some of that does count for CUs, and there's very extensive professional learning that happens with IB. So we try to get really creative about how we can have a win-win situation where the teacher is actually benefiting from that, not only in the positive professional learning that they're getting to deliver great instruction, but also to keep them moving and incentivize that as well. So it really depends on how we're implementing that professional learning, but they can receive CUs for that.
That's great. Thank you. And then I noticed that there were a lot of underrepresented students in the AP courses that that passed, but we didn't have any signing up. What are we doing to like market AP for our kids that don't see themselves there?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Trustee Guzman, Jennifer Lau for the record. I think one of the things that we're really targeting is we know that it doesn't start when students are juniors and seniors. So using PSAT and MAP data, Dr. Barton mentioned the ad hoc reports. We have built systems within Infinite Campus where we can pull assessment data. So based on whether a student passes any of their MAP assessments, their PSAT assessment, or if they're currently showing success in their honors or accelerated course, it will automatically give us a report of students who should be in an accelerated or honors course. So as early as 6th grade, we're trying to identify students that would show the ability to do well in those things, and we can see exactly where they're showing that ability to do it. So by doing that, we're hopefully eliminating any potential biases our educators may or may not have when they're doing recommendations. And we are trying to target earlier. So really heavily last year, grades 5 through 9, making sure that we're using that data to recommend students. Because getting an AP student in high school I don't want to say it's too late because it's never too late, but it's a harder sell if you've never taken any honors for 11 years to then say, hey, you're going to take college right now. So it's trying to do that. It's also very much in these conversations that we have with our principals is when you are building a program, having the right teacher in the course is instrumental, especially when you're trying to get kids up for the first time. So if this is the first time they're taking an advanced course, they're taking AP, they don't see themselves as AP, they know who their star teachers are, they know who's going to be able to motivate and give them the support that they need. That's the beauty of the AP course. They're able to take college level coursework, but they have the support of their high school teacher. So being able to really truly do that with fidelity and make sure putting a student in a course that is not being taught with fidelity isn't going to do anybody justice. So really pairing it and being very mindful of how we put them in it. We don't necessarily need to have a student take 10 AP courses, but if their love is government, students love taking government, and you have a great government teacher who really enjoys it, that can be their one AP class. You just need a single one that can open their eyes and show them that they can succeed.
Thank you. My son didn't see himself in AP, so he took dual enrollment, and I was like, what's the difference? But okay, I understand. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate this. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. Trustee Ford.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I noticed that there wasn't a specific mention of magnet programs or CTA in the discussion about CTE. It's my understanding that the big difference between those things is that magnet and CTA, Career Tech Academies, come with federal funding that would support the programs, the equipment, and transportation for students, and among other things. So I guess my question, two-part question is there any breakdown in data that shows the comparisons of enrollment and successes between magnet programs or federally supported programs or the CTE programs, which is based on the district's or principal's choice to bring into a school? And are there any specific plans going forward with magnet and CTA versus just general CTE programs?
Dr. Barton. Dr. Barton.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Trustee Ford, you talk about federal funding, and there's definitely multiple funding pots, right? So you think about the CTAs, and we've had those historically through our capital program. But every high school in the Valley has federal funding for CTE programs through Perkins. Mm-hmm. So that is the advantage that we have by using our Perkins dollars strategically. We're able to get those CTE offerings not only at our CTAs, but at all of our comprehensive high schools. So they touch all Valley schools. And so I hope that addresses the question. As far as the data, for CTE, as Ms. Moore mentioned, over 60,000 high school students across the Valley, CTAs and comprehensive schools, are enrolled in a program of study. So we'll continue to try to improve that number as well.
It does kind of answer the question, I guess. Specifically, we can say a school like Kenny-Gwin, for example, which has a magnet program in it, where you have some kids who attend the magnet program, and I don't know if it's the same way, but my son went to it a couple years ago, had a different start time, a little bit longer hours, and had access to transportation within the transportation zone. So it even extended to students who were outside of their normal school zone. And now my son is in a CTA as well, which I know has some available perks like transportation. And of course, it's a lottery system, but it's intended to be equitable, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, besides just the core curriculum, I believe that magnet programs still get additional funding than regular or standard CTE programs. Is that correct? And I guess I'm just trying to see, like, is there any reason why we should be like, I mean, I know for a fact that most families want their kids in magnet programs, especially compared to charters. And obviously CTE is amazing, but when we're strapped for cash and looking at the legislature to help, you know, any additional funding from the federal government is good. So I don't know, can you clarify that for me a little bit?
Ms. Moore?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Ford. So in terms of the resources, as Dr. Barton mentioned, we leverage state allocation as well as the federal Perkins grant to support all career and technical education programs. In terms of our magnet programs, so the basis of our magnet programs in the Clark County School District is to reduce, prevent, or eliminate racial isolation across our district. And so in that, we have put additional resources towards those schools that do include transportation so that we can reduce, prevent, or eliminate racial isolation by being able to extend those transportation lines to more students to ensure that there's a diversity at that school. In addition to that, so that we can offer those additional electives, sometimes there are additional supports for staffing and then a recruiting position at those schools that they have a very targeted and strategic mission, which is to ensure that their demographic of that school matches that of the district demographic. So they are working full-time in terms of doing community events and exploration activities with students well before they even get to those schools to ensure that we are increasing access for students. Over the last several years, we've increased our activities in terms of recruiting with those individuals, where back in 2014, we used to have 2 major events every single year, which was not enough. Our parents did not understand what those options were. They didn't know what was available to them. Now we do almost 200 events a year, as led by the district as well as at the school level in both English and in Spanish throughout about a 4 or 5 month period of time. We know that that's increased the knowledge of what those programs are and what's available to our families exponentially over that time. So that would be just an example of what that person does at that school. But in terms of resources for our CTE programs, all programs are funded in the same manner.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. Trustee Cavazos?
Thank you, Madam President. And I think a lot of this has already been answered by the questions asked by my colleagues. So thank you, Dr. Barton, Ms. Moore, and Ms. Lau. Going all the way back to the challenges, and kudos for all the progress that we have made with all the work that you've been doing. Going back to one of the challenges listed as far as on strategic placement, what did you and your team find to be the most challenging factor within that specific part of the challenge, I guess you would say, the strategic placement? And some of it you just finished talking about. I know, loaded question, right? Sorry. Dr. Barton's trying to decide, who am I going to punt this?
Well,
Dr. Barton?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Dara, Trustee Cavazos, can you call our attention to which slide you're referring to?
Yeah, it was on the very, very beginning when we were on the CTE on the first column of the challenge at the very beginning. Right there. On the first one, on the CTE pathways. I guess I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry.
Ms. Moore?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Cavazos, I think from the CTE perspective, and I know Ms. Lyle will want to speak a little to the AP piece as well, but I think it goes back to the comment that I made earlier, was it's really about changing our vocabulary about how we call we call these career and college opportunities. So still we're talking about them as electives. So when you talk about something as an elective, we're not thinking about it from the standpoint of this actually could lead to a lucrative career post-graduation, and that it also leads to different kinds of behaviors and so forth. So if it's just an elective and I finish year 1, there's no obligation for me to finish year 2. And so what we found, and we're doing some preliminary work with our students, we just did a survey recently because we want to get feedback from them of how they decided to choose their CTE program and what we could do differently. So we have a survey out right now where we're getting really interesting data, and then we'll have some focus groups in January. But one of the things that we're getting back right now is that students were saying that they'd had really little to no understanding of what the quote elective was that they were placed in. It just happened to fit in their schedule. So that's a lot of what the feedback is that we're getting. And that is what we know, that data, we know that that's been happening, but it just confirms what we knew. But that's really what has ignited our work and the passion for our work that we're doing right now in terms of the master scheduling, and that if you have a program of study and students are dropping off after the first year, how did they know about that option to begin with? How are those students placed in there? Have they been at your schools? We know that students that schools that do really well in their completion rates, those middle school students have been on their campus, they've sat in the classes, they've been to lunch with the other kids. They've got the whole experience so they can make a very well-informed decision. And so that's really what we're referring to when we're talking about strategic enrollment. Is it's a long-term plan, and it requires a lot of interaction with those students and increasing their understanding of what these programs are. In addition to that, that's what the CTE department really spends a lot of time doing too, is manufacturing day, construction career day. So they know what those options are. It's not very it's not
glamorous,
palatable for students when you're like, hey, go into advanced manufacturing. They have no idea what that is. So that's the conversations that we're having with schools about how do we break down those barriers, and how do we change our vocabulary about how we all these career pathways.
So vocabulary, changing the vocabulary, changing it. I think one of my colleagues had brought up about the misconceptions, and then also it all winds into the pathway that we put these children on. So I really appreciate your elaboration of that. This other question was just kind of, I think it was brought up by one of my colleagues too, having to do with the educator incentives, and Dr. Jara had addressed that also. That, of course, we are going to be working with our legislature. We are going to be asking for more money, of course, to be able to fund those things. But I just want to make a comment that we do not want to ignore the other factors that have to do with like working conditions, things that the district can improve on if we are able to get that money. So I just wanted to make that comment. One other thing that I wanted to ask about, what came from my colleague, piggybacking, this is what happens when you're the last trustee in the queue here, is when she was asking Trustee Guzman about the unions. I had noticed in talking to some of our counselors that some, and again, there are some that have a wealth of experience, have been there for many years, and they're very familiar with the apprenticeship programs that the unions have. And then others, maybe some of our newer ones, are not quite as familiar yet. Do we have anything in the works to have our counselors become more familiar with what is offered by our union?
Dr. Barton?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Cavazos. Great question. We've done counselor visits to our unions, and we did that pre-pandemic. Ms. Martin is now in that seat as the Director of Guidance and Counseling, thankfully. She's an intimate partner with this work as we do this with our unions. We are going to continue that work, whether it's visiting the crane operators union. I'm seeing it in my head right now, 30 counselors that went on this trip, seeing what the operating cranes do and how a student, how they have an opportunity to become part of that union. So we will continue to do that work and make sure our counselors can, I think they need to see it.
Right.
And so if we do field trips, professional field trips, to let them see those opportunities that our students can have, they promote them on their own.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. I think that Superintendent Jara, I had one other just comment I'll make real quick since Superintendent Jara wants to chime in here. I just wanted to, I'm very appreciative of the comment that Ms. Lyle made about that the right teacher, the one that can, whether it's just one class or 4 classes, that can really inspire that student and really put them on that track there. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Cavazos. Superintendent?
Yeah, mine will be brief. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. And I also want to commend the partnership with Workforce Connections because they have been training, and we have an ambassador program. I know Chad's here in the back, but they've been training our counselors. I think we maybe have close to 17, 18 counselors that have been trained to seeing all the different opportunities that we have. So.
Sorry, I am managing some cards here. So this is not an action item. We'll have time at the end to be able to speak on this item. So there is still time to provide this comment. It'll just be at the end. All right, trustees. Thank you again, staff, for Dr. Barton, Ms. Moore, Ms. Lyle. Appreciate all the work and the updates on where we are with this metric, with these metrics. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 4.01. Before we fully open, if anyone wants to speak on this item, please make sure to submit your yellow cards. When they happen afterwards. Before or after? This is a not. Yeah. Yeah. So one, it came after we had already started the item, and it's also not an action item. You can still speak on this item. It'll just be after on our last bit of public comment. Correct. You'll have to wait until to our last segment of public comment. So this next item is the appointment. Well, again, last call for 4.01. This item is appointment of the Nevada Interscholastic Activity Association Board of Control. So this is a discussion, possible action to appoint a voting member in alignment to amending the Nevada Administrative Code for the the NIAA Board of Control. So this particular item was for a parent representative. There are 3 folks added, one person representing rurals, one Washoe, and the other here in Clark. So a survey was put out, and now these are the, in front of you are the applications we received. So this is the time to discuss and provide some feedback here. All right, Trustee Brooks, you're first in the queue.
Thank you, President Cepeda. It's my understanding that only 2 members who submitted this are eligible. So can I just get confirmation which 2?
That is correct. From those who submitted, because the other caveat is that the applicant or the representative must be a parent and not an employee of the district, whether that's Washoe or Clark. And I think here I may need some help from Dr. Barton. Dr. Barton, can you tell us a little bit, just to be preemptive about some questions, can you share when the survey went out, how long it went, and then which ones are the ones that are eligible based off of not being employees with the district? Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara. To your question, President, there are 2 candidates that are qualified based on the NIA rules. That's inclusive of Kimberly Brock and Deanna Riddle. We did I know Ms. Sloan will give the precise dates, but we publicized through multiple channels about 17 days from my recollection where we allowed this opportunity to apply. And so Ms. Sloan can give us the precise dates, but anyone that applied by the deadline was obviously in the packet this evening. But again, based on the qualification highlights from NIA, there are only 2 from the submissions that are qualified to be considered this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Barton. And trustees, you received all of them because again, this is, at the end of the day, these are the folks we're reviewing based off what we received in terms of when the application was posted and applications received. Ms. Sloan, did you want to add any additional comment, or did Dr. Barton hit all marks? Ms. Sloan.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jar. Yes, the dates, there was a survey that went out for 2 weeks. It started January 18th and concluded June 15th.
Thank you very much. Trustee Brooks, did you have any additional questions?
I don't have additional questions, but I am going to make a motion because I think the information is pretty straightforward. I'm going to move to approve Deanna Riddle as the representative for NIAA, and I'm basing that decision on the fact that they have more experience in different seasons for the sports, as well as some more historical context in their background.
All right, thank you, Trustee Brooks. Trustee Guzman, you're next in the queue. However, we have a motion, so we either need a second or some action needs to be done on this action. Want to wait? Okay. So there's a motion. Okay. All right, Trustee Cavazos, you want to skip? Did you want to skip? Because we need a second on this motion, or, okay. Trustee Garcia Morales?
I'm willing second.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. We'll go back to the folks who are in the queue. Trustee Guzman, you were next in the queue. Did you there you go. Go ahead, Trustee Guzman.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. The two people that were put forward that you said that fit all of the criteria. When I'm going through it, I'm just curious. Was there anything that stood out to you both that would make them the best fit to sit on this board?
I guess, Trustee Guzman, I guess I have a little bit of concerns of staff making those recommendations because it is a board appointment, and so I just wanted to share my concerns. If you'd like us to answer from staff.
Well, I don't want to cross that line, but I am. So maybe I'm just curious because I know that this was on an agenda and then it was taken off the agenda, and so I'm just wondering if this is a procedural thing or if there is maybe public comment that could tell us why we should pick. I just, for someone who doesn't sit on the NIAA board, I'd like to hear from our representative on exactly what we're looking for, what's needed, because I feel like I don't have enough information to make this kind of decision.
Thank you. And part of the reason why I was pulled is because we wanted to make sure all the trustees had all the information, had all the applications, were able to review it with enough time. So that was a large reason why I was pulled and then reposted now. So we'll come back to you, Trustee Guzman, if you have, after you hear maybe some comments from Trustee Cavazos. Trustee Cavazos.
Thank you, Madam President. And Trustee Guzman is correct that this was pulled from a previous agenda, and I believe that I was not the only trustee that had asked for the additional information. But we did have some, I guess, some delays or glitches on how this was carried out. So I do understand the concern with asking for a direct, recommendation from staff. This is a board decision. We're supposed to have had this selected, and the parent should have already been sitting at the September 28th NIAA Board of Control meeting. And if you look at what the NAC, the 385B.106 to 110, that these members are, this is something that we want the person who is appointed to be able to understand that there are 4 quarterly meetings. There may be an impact if they have a full-time job, travel to Reno, because we alternate, but that if you watched any of the hearings of when this was first decided by the legislature, that we want more transparency, we want more involvement by a parent. We had a student that is already sitting on the board, but that was taken care of by the executive director. So I do understand that Trustee Guzman is asking for more information here, but I do want to point out that the process, at first, we only had 1 person that was submitted, and now we have 2. So I do want to say that there were some issues that had to do with that. And I think because of the concerns that President Cepeda had brought up as far as not like crossing the line and asking for specific staff, what is standing out, I'll go ahead and stop there. But we originally had only 1 person recommended.
Well, when you say recommended, like eligible, is that just to be?
No, recommended. But we didn't have the information on the other qualified applicant, as you said, and that's why it was pulled.
Okay. Did you have any additional questions? Okay. Trustee Ford.
Thank you. I guess I'm not really clear why there was a motion made for 1 person and then the reasoning was given that they clearly have more experience. Because when I was looking through both of the letters of interest, I outlined, their experience, and it appears to me that Kimberly Brock has a lot more, including actual experience on the ground at schools, fundraising, and having secured large sponsorships. Served on the disciplinary committee, was chosen as their volunteer of the year for 2021-2022. She runs a Facebook group with a lot of parents, is the main communicator about sports to these parents. Even during COVID, put together a webinar in conjunction with NIAA, the Southern Nevada Health District, and CCSD to share with the community and with our challenges with communication. I feel that choosing somebody with more feet on the ground and experience working with and communicating with other parents would be more beneficial going forward. So I would like to not support the current motion and support a future motion to appoint Kimberly Brock.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. Trustee Garcia Morales.
How long is the term? Somebody help me learn how long the term is.
Miss Sloan? I was going to ask staff for the question. Okay. Dr. Barton?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, as stated in the reference material, this would be an appointment from January 18th, 2023 through June 15th, 23.
Thank you, Dr. Barton.
Thank you.
Was that all your question, Trustee Garcia Morales? All right. Trustee Cavazos?
Yes, in addition, and thank you, Dr. Barton, I just wanted to, I have a copy here of the posting that was put out on the high school websites. And just to verify, originally, as mandated, this person was supposed to begin their term in September, and then it would conclude in June. So now we are up to where we do have a deadline of January, but then that appointment, this is why I want to make sure that we bring the process out of what is supposed to be happening, because this was supposed to be fully a board task. So we have to do this again in June. So I want to make sure that the process is clear so that we are able to see that this is not supposed to be a staff task. We have enough, our staff has so much to do already. But I want to make sure that people know that then we're going to have to do this again in June. And then, to the best of my knowledge, it would be, and I'll ask Ms. Sloan to comment on that or to confirm that this will then be a 3-year appointment like a regular NIAA Board of Control member. Is that correct?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent, Trustee Cavazos, you are absolutely correct. There was a 3-year term. However, the NIAA elected that CCSD serves 1-year term. I think Washoe does 2-year, NASB does 3. They do a rotation. You're absolutely correct. We will do this again in the.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, trustees, let me double check that we don't have any public comment on this item. Any public comment on 4.01? And I do not believe I saw anyone sign up ahead of time for 4.01. That's correct. All right, trustees, so we have a motion by Trustee Brooks. Trustee Brooks, can you remind me again your motion?
I move to approve Deanna Riddle as the NIAA representative.
So we had a motion by Trustee Brooks and a second by Trustee Garcia Morales. So we'll go ahead and do that vote and then see where we land. We're ready for a vote. Okay, that motion passes 5-7. Oh, sorry, 5-2, total of 7. Apologies, folks. Thank you again, and congratulations to Ms. Riddle. Thank you, Ms. Sloan. Thank you, Dr. Barton, for all the assistance here. We are moving on to agenda item 4.02. And again, just noting that there was no public comment either in advance or in those yellow cards for 4.01. Moving on to 4.02. Again, folks, if you want to speak on agenda item 4.02, make sure you submit your card now. We do have a couple. So please do that now if you wish to speak on 4.02. Otherwise, once we start the item, we'll not take any additional public comment. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to toss this to Mr. Todd Story. Superintendent, apologies. Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. It's that time of year as we're getting ready for the legislative session. What you will have from staff and our Chief Communications and Government Relations and our Director of Government Relations, Patricia Haddad, and our CFO, just go over a collective body of work of superintendents. Our NAS association that I serve as the president this year has put together an invest document, and this has been, since 2003, a collective body of work by all superintendents, 17 superintendents, and the State Charter Authority. This is really dovetails, and the reason our CFO is here with us is because there is some conversations and alignment to the People-Centered Funding Formula. And the question this past year, as we were getting ready to present and put together, it was, if you think about the plan of added dollars, the question was asked, what would you do with it? So the 17 of us and Rebecca Fiden with the State Charter Authority got together and put together this document that our legislative team will use with our legislators this session to really improve the outcomes of all children in Nevada. One of the things that we are really making an effort that is a collective body, meaning NAS. Our issues in Clark County are similar as they are in Lyon and White Pines, in Humboldt, and Washoe. We just have more zeros, more students, more staff, but the very same issues that we're facing, they are facing, just a smaller scale. So I think this really is an opportunity for us, this legislative session, together to have the legislature and the governor-elect fund K-12 education in the state.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Todd Story.
Thank you, President Cepeda, Trustees, Superintendent Jara, Todd Story, Chief Communications Officer. for the record. So just to add to what the superintendent was saying, that in the INVEST document, every legislative session seeks to answer the question, what is needed to improve student achievement in Nevada? So with all 17 school districts and the superintendent signing on to INVEST, having contributed to the document that you have before you, it seeks to answer that question, and specifically what we're targeting this year is the amount of $270 million, minimally, we hope, knowing that there are funds available that have been outlined for the upcoming biennium. So as we work as school districts across the state of Nevada, we are all encouraged to adopt the INVEST document, to ratify it. And I'll let Patricia speak a little bit to the strategy that we're going to be utilizing as we approach the legislature before you take any action.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Ms. Haddad?
Thank you. Patricia Haddad for the record. As Todd mentioned, this document is coming before all boards of trustees for ratification. And in addition to that, our district, we're working directly with NAS to meet with education committee leadership as well as legislators now, and of course throughout the session, to share these priorities. So far, the conversations have been positive, and it's been really powerful to share that all of the 17 districts are on the same page as far as what is needed with regards to investments in education in our community. So we will continue to have conversations to ensure that this information gets into the hands of each of the legislators, and ensure that it's clear how this overall complements our district's strategy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Story?
Yes, President Cepeda, Trustees, Superintendent Jara. So Jason Gowdy, his Chief Financial Officer, has joined us here at the dais to help illustrate what we're looking at in the upcoming biennium as far as what's been identified through the Economic Forum, but also the Funding Commission. So if Mr. Gowdy could explain a little bit about the targets that they identified in the process to come up with the amounts that we're looking at as we enter into the session starting in February.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Gowdy, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Jason Gowdy for the record. Members of the board, President Cepeda, and Dr. Jara. Jason Gowdy for the record. So there's a couple of pieces that Mr. Story just mentioned. One is Economic Forum did announce a fairly large increase over the last biennium budget. We were expecting that because the current biennium budget, or the last biennium budget that we're in right now, was significantly lower than actuals. So when you look at the numbers, there's a 2.9% growth in taxable revenue numbers built into that model, which are really the new bienniums compared to actuals. When you compare prior budget to this coming budget, it's close to a 20% increase over the biennium. And so that provides some assurances that the state will have probably a higher level of funding than we've seen in quite a while in order to enact programs, especially under K-12. The other component to it as it relates to the Commission on School Funding and the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan, there's a number of different components to that help protect districts once we went away from the guaranteed minimum. One of those is that there's a couple of triggers that we must increase at the same rate. K-12 education funding must increase at the same rate as the general fund increases. So that helps us. There's also some requirements in there that base funding must increase at the same level as inflation. And knowing that there's a very high inflationary impact at this point. So those are also a couple of good pieces that help the district and K-12 education overall. The last piece as to how these numbers were derived is that the Funding Commission has spent the last 6 months to a year focusing on, once we got the mechanics of the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan working, more about funding and identifying funding sources. So there were two main components, one being what we considered using the term adequate, which is an average of national funding for education from the states. And then we used a term more optimal, which was really based off the Augenblick study that went through and identified specific needs and staffing levels and such. The difference in those numbers is the first number to get to average is somewhere around $2.8 billion, inflation adjusted over the next 10 years, hence the $270-something million, which is 1/10 of that. right? And then additionally, you have the other component, which is the optimal, which is closer to 3.4, 3.6 million. And so we've included those in the massive report that was sent to the legislature from the commission funding to help illustrate the needs, as well as a document similar to this that Dr. Jar described, where the superintendents included what we would do with additional monies, and then the CFOs of the groups put monetary amounts to that, and it came out without any manipulation to somewhere right around $3.6 billion.
Thank
And
you,
that's
Mr.
all I
Gandhi.
had. Thank you.
No, appreciate the additional context. Trustees, right, I think we could go to trustees, correct? Trustees, any questions? Comments, concerns? Trustee Brooke.
Thank you. Thank you to staff. I appreciate you bringing this forward. My question is if there's intention at the other district levels for them to adopt this through their board?
Superintendent?
Madam President, members of the board, yes, superintendents are bringing that to the board. Some already started according to the schedule, but by the end of this month, all 17 will adopt it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your work on it.
Any other trustees? Trustee Guzman.
I'd like to make the motion to adopt the Invest 2023.
I'll go ahead. Oh, we do. Thank you for the crowd. We do have 2 public commenters before we
Okay.
get
All right.
going. I think we could, yeah.
I can hold
apologies.
off.
You are the only one. I thought I had 2. I only have 1.
Okay.
You submitted yourself twice. That's why.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure. Anyways, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. So there's a little notation on the agenda next to this item that says parent community support. When was the last time we had a public engagement meeting? When was the last time that we had like a trustee public meeting since, what was it, the CIP meetings? I wouldn't consider those that. I think it's been over a year and a half since our district or any of our trustees have had any type of community meeting. And you know me, I'll stand here and talk till I'm blue in the face about how much our community wants those meetings. So how do we suspect we're gonna get parent or community support on this when we're not actually supporting our community either? We cut our comments down to 3 minutes. Nobody can see us on the camera. Nobody wants to come out and talk to people. And most people are feeding their kids right now and doing baths and getting their kids ready for bed for school tomorrow. So why would they show up here, right? So as I vomited all over the floor over here, I found so many wonderful things that actually touch on every single topic for this item. And I'm gonna keep going till my time runs out, and then I'll add on to it in the next agenda item. Let's see here. Actually, we'll jump over here. In our warrants for tonight, we approved over $2.8 million for tech supplies. You would think for that amount of money for like reading programs, things like that our kids would actually be proficient. So how is that going to get us up into, levels of support, safe, like student achievement, right? Then we move over, there's another, like in our purchase orders for like over $100,000 to one company for more.
Ms. Binder, we're not on those items.
No,
We're on the
I
invest
understand, but
item.
it actually, it all goes back to like community support.
Just redirecting.
And spending, right? Because we all spend money here to educate the children who aren't proficient. So if we're blowing millions and millions and millions of dollars, how do you expect a parent like me to go to the legislature next session and support any increased funding other than for our wonderful teachers and staff, because we're blowing so much money left and right for programs that aren't bringing our kids to proficient standards? I mean, I have a spreadsheet. I will gladly email you of the waste over the last 3 fiscal years for left and right on programs. I'll stop there because I think the rest will fit in much better on the.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We will move, let's see here. Trustee Guzman.
Can I make my motion?
Yes,
now?
please.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a motion to adopt Invest 2023.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. Trustee Garcia Morales.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Guzman, second by Trustee Garcia Morales. Please cast your votes. Yep, motion passes 7-0. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Story. Thank you, Ms. Haddad. Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. And I think Mr. Gowdy is just going to, are you going to stay in that seat? You don't want to move to this? All right, accountants. Oh, all right. We're moving on to agenda item 4.03. This is our amended final budget. Mr. Gowdy and team are here. Take it away, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. I have my deputy superintendent or deputy CFO up here, Diane Bartholomew, to help steer through. So here's the overview. We'll skip that page. So the timeline, just to show you where we're at amended final budget. This is the last, the budget that we'll submit. We'll submit this budget prior to year end as required by NRS. Next slide. So just some uncertainties. We always talk about what's out there. Obviously, enrollment and uncertainties is one of our key components. Risk of recession. There were a lot of comments, around Economic Forum and the other groups around possible recession within the next 2 years, which is our biennium. Additionally, there's certainly education funding uncertainty in the 2023 legislative session and acceptance of funding recommendations from the Commission on School Funding. So there's a lot of moving parts there. And so there's certainly uncertainty there. And then also the potential continuation of the ESSER funding initiatives post-federal funding. We've already started looking at that and some of these programs that we're going to need to enhance and keep moving forward without federal funding and how that'll impact our future budget. Student enrollment, we did have a decrease in enrollment. From final budget, we anticipated early in the year that we were going to be somewhat flat. We ended up did increase just about 4,000 students, so that'll impact our revenues, and I'll discuss that a little later. I just wanted to just touch on the pupil-centered funding plan again. I know it's technically been in place for a couple of years now, but it's still new. We don't talk about it a whole lot, so I just wanted to kind of talk about the large objectives and talk about that. Really, the key objective is that funds are distributed by each school district to its public schools in a manner that ensures each pupil in the school district receives a reasonably equal educational opportunity. And there's a few different components to it. One, the adjusted base funding, which is really the funding that's supposed to address all students. Then we have weighted funding, which addresses students of need in different ways. And then also our auxiliary service funding, which really for us is transportation. The challenges that we have found is that fixed costs in small schools affect schools disproportionately. Same thing with like custodial costs. We may have similar sized schools from an enrollment perspective, but they may be drastically different either in age and or size of building and requirements to clean. So there's components there as it relates to our support professionals. Staffing ratios for our 1- and 2-star schools are still lower than what's compared to the 3, 4, and 5 stars. And then there's also different types of schools, magnet CTAs and such, that have different needs. As I mentioned, there are weights. There's technically 3 weights and 1 quasi-weight. Special education is a quasi-weight because it's kind of treated like a weight. Some parts of the plan and others it's separate of it. Essentially, special education is funded in the same way that it has been done in the past. And so we technically separated it out rather than considering a weight. That was a recommendation from the Funding Commission. So our at-risk students right now that's still under the free and reduced lunch definition, the state and commission and others have adopted the use of a different mechanism to define at-risk those that are at risk of graduating. The state is still working to actually get the approval on the actual model that will be used, and so that will be hopefully coming soon. English learners, and then gifted and talented are the other weights. This is just a snapshot of our total per pupil revenues. And so you can see that it's 95, 96 in totality. Did not change dramatically from the on a per pupil level, but what did change is our totality of revenues as it relates to based on enrollment. So I'll touch a little bit on that. So this is where the money comes from. This looks very much the same as last time, but very different from the prior years, where the vast majority of all of our money now comes from the state education fund, and then some of that is bonds, and some of the other local components that are built in, bond proceeds, things like that. So this is a summary of the general operating revenues. As I mentioned, we had a decline in revenues, primarily due to the lower enrollment. You'll notice that in the state education fund, a drop of around $32.5 million. Interest income is also down. And this is very similar to the discussion we had last time on the annual comprehensive financial report, in that we're required to mark our securities to market. We do hold them to maturity, so there's not a real risk, but from an accounting perspective. So we did lower our budget to more match what we think is going to show up in our final report. And so with that, there was right around a $32 million decrease in operating revenues. The next slide is really just showing that same amount, because we talk about the state sources, which is really the state education fund, and it's really based off of enrollment. So where is the money spent? Very similar to the past. For those that have been around a while, we used to run 87 to 88% in salaries and benefits. That's still true, except that this is just our general fund. And so when we transfer the monies into our new special revenue funds for our weighted funding, most of that money is sitting in people. And so that's where it disproportionately changes this calculation. I always like to point out, obviously, that the vast majority of funding is in our people, and also it's in the people that are in school. So school-based strategic budget and school-based is about 85% of total dollars in FTE spend. Down below that, we talk about textbook and supplies. That's also very large, and the primary reason for that being large is we assume that the large carryover amount that's sitting in schools right now does get spent, and a large amount of that is sitting in supplies. We also have a very large electric, gas, water, and other utility bill. So that's another large chunk. And then professional services is $60 million. Some of the large items that we talk about, accelerations academies, it's about $8.7 million, which is an increase of about $2 million over last year. This is a cost neutral option. What happens here is students that have withdrawn from the district, they are identified by Acceleration Academies. They provide services and ultimately get them re-enrolled back in our schools, and they get 90% of whatever money we would get from the state. So we actually pick up about 10% on each of these students, and it also gets kids back into schools and ready for graduation. The next is we spent about $8.3 million on speech pathology, $6.9 million on contracted social workers, $6.9 million on occupational physical therapy, $5.1 million on health services for contracted nurses. We have about $3.4 million in our general counsel office. We spent about $3.3 million on Hope Squared. We have around $2.6 million in athletics, which is for referees, physical therapy, et cetera. $2.5 million for general maintenance contracts for preventative maintenance. We've started to increase that budget a little bit. General accounting, which is our banking fees, our audit fees, Eide Bailey Financial Services is about $1.8 million. For the assessment department, the NWEA region consultants are about $1.5 million. We spend $1.2 million in other professional services. We have Lockton Health, which advises on our benefits, and some other components in there. And then right about $1 million for our vehicle operation services, Zonar, which tracks our buses, DOT physicals, and some other professional components in there. So that's the vast majority of the spend in that professional services line. Next, there we go. So just talking about where the money spent in the general fund, not a significant difference from the final budget. But again, we talk here, the vast majority of our funding in general funds is spent in strategic budgets, in facilities, teaching and learning unit, business and finance. So those show the FTEs as well as the total spend, which obviously is right around the $2.6 billion with around 21,000 FTEs. And then we also talk about the Special Education Fund, $563 million, 6,000 FTEs. And the piece that we always like to talk about here is obviously everything, the vast majority of these funds are in the classrooms with licensed positions, support positions, as well as the transportation that we utilize to ensure these students get to school. Next slide is the budget comparison. I already mentioned this is actually comparing last year's amended final to this year's amended final, where the previous slide was amended to final, which is why they're slightly different numbers. But there's still a decline in revenues, and there's actually an increase in expenditures. And there's a couple of reasons for this. So I wanted to go through some of the large components of it. One is there's around $28 million of prior year medium-term bond carryover that's built in there. Those are the bonds that we issue either for buses and or IT equipment. We've actually started to add more IT equipment to that, as well as our white fleet. So it's not truly an expenditure increase, but it is from this perspective. We had around a $14.6 million increase in utilities, a lot of that coming from electricity. We had the additional Education Support Employees Association health contributions around $6.6 million. Fall strategic budget adjustments of right around $3 million. And that's a combination of a couple things. One is the number of staff in strategic budgets declined because of the enrollment, but then we also had the increases due to the increase in teacher salary, starting teaching salary, as well as moving principals to 12 months. And so the net of those components had a slight increase. We also have $3 million in there for what we call Health Concept Program. This is a wellness center program that we're working on. We just finished the RFP process and have allotted some money in there to provide some better medical services to the employees under our medical benefit plan. I already mentioned the increase related to the acceleration academies. We also the NWE region consultants. We also had about $1 million almost of increases to the Northeast Career and Technical Academy startup budget. And then we had a handful of other components for some other support areas in facilities management and sustainability, HR, et cetera. And so those are the majority of the expenditure increases, which are right around $46 million higher than the final budget. Slide. So then that gets us to the fund balance discussion. Our budgeted unassigned fund balance for this year under AFB is still at 4.25%, which is right around the $121 million. The larger difference is in the assigned for future unknown uncertainties that we had. That was around $94 million. That's down closer to 11 to 14 million. And most of those items that I mentioned in expenditure increases were the reason for those changes and reduction in that additional reserve that we had. This is just a visual to show the 4.25% that we have budgeted for 2023. Obviously, going back a decade, that's 4 times the level that we had back then. And then the last slide is really employee contract status. We have not yet begun any significant negotiations. We've obviously been pushing some MOAs through for different components, but the actual large negotiations for the next collective bargaining agreement will start soon. The first step was getting the overall economic forum information in. The next step will see the first version of the governor's budget. And from then we'll be able to start kind of putting some pencil to paper and understanding what we think we're going to get. And with that, I will open it up to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. All right. I have a couple trustees in the queue, and I know we have at least one yellow card. We'll start with Trustee Williams. There you go, Trustee Williams. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't have any questions. I was just going to make a motion to adopt the amendment for the final budget.
All right, we are going to have to circle back because I need to take public comment. All right. Any other trustees with questions before we move? Okay. Trustee Garcia Morales.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Gowdy, do we have any investments or funds or resources located in Nevada State Bank?
Jason Getty for the record. I believe the only financial component we have at Nevada State Bank is a CD required, maybe through risk management or some other component. Bank of America is our bank, and so we have all of our traditional banking components through Bank of America. And then through our investment component, we may have other investments in other areas, but that would not include Nevada State Bank either.
I just bring that up simply because there are parties involved at Nevada State Bank who are actively working towards dismantling our school system. So I know this is not part of this particular piece, but I just think it's important that if we have to review or consider items, allocating those resources so that our values, which are in alignment with, I believe, that we have said that we're not, just to make sure that our values and our resources are also aligned together. Nevada State Bank is again, the CEO is very actively involved in ensuring that there is a dismantling of the school district. And so since we're talking about money, I think it's important to also bring those issues to light. So my other question is with respect to special education. You mentioned that it's a quasi-weighted funding piece. Is there any hope? We know, based off of other presentations that have taken place, we know that there is that it is costly to it is very costly to support students in special education. Our federal government does not reimburse us at the same rate. Like we always spend more, which absolutely is deserved and we need to spend even more to make sure that all of our students who have special needs have that support. But what is there any hope for? I know you're not you don't have a crystal ball in front of you, but are there any hopes for the legislature really investing in special education so that it is supported, or even at the federal level? Any insight that you may have?
Mr. Gowdy?
So Jason Gowdy for the record. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Trustee Garcia Morales, I don't have a whole lot of hope that the federal government is going to change their stance on the unfunded mandate as it relates to the requirements. And they rely on the states. I don't think that's going to change dramatically. I think obviously the federal government has made a large investment in education over the last couple of years to help us get out of a very deep hole. But I don't think that's going to change the way that they look at that component. Special education is one of the reasons that it's separate in the funding formula is that we didn't want to lose the visibility to it within the formula itself. And so most of the CFOs wanted to keep it out separately so that we could track it and ensure that there's still an emphasis put on the need and the very specific need for that. The other component was it was proposed to be a 1.1 multiplier. And given the vast differences in costs related to the different IEPs, a 1-to-1 multiplier did not do us any favors. And so that was the other reason that we fought to kind of keep it out. I think that it is very much in the same conversation as increasing funding. So we talk about adequate and we talk about optimal. Special education is part of that funding.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. Trustee Brooks?
Thank you, President Cepeda. So you've touched a little bit on this, and you probably touched during your presentation, but could you remind me, we're trying to reallocate funds based on needs of students. So we know as a state, we know as a community that some students cost more to educate. What is the additional funding for these weights for each one of these categories? How much additional resources did the state allocate to fund students that we know need more resources?
Jason Getty for the record. I don't have those easily accessible. We can get them. From my recollection, it's somewhere around 120 to 130 million split between GATE, which would be the lowest dollar amount funded, EL, which is the highest dollar, and then at risk being in the middle. And I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head. Sitting here,
Okay, and then another follow-up question on that. So when they do the funding under this model, they do the highest funded group first, and then you don't double dip, right? You don't get funded twice.
So Jason got it for the record, correct. And that's why I emphasized that the special education is a quasi-weight, because it's considered a weight for the waterfall. We call it the waterfall. It starts at the top, it goes to the base, and then the waterfall from a weight perspective goes at the highest weight, not the highest dollar amount. So EL is the highest weight. Well, special education starts first, right? Then it goes to, so if they're special education students, then we would get no other weighted funding from them. Then it goes to EL, and then for any other students in either GATE or at risk that were also EL, we would not get it, we would only get the EL funding. So you're correct, it goes, and then right now, as of right now, GATE has a higher weight than the at-risk. That may change during the next legislative session based on some preliminary information we saw from the NDE, but that relies on some legislature, so.
Thank you. Thank you on your work, not just with this, but on your work. I know funding is not an easily explained topic, so I appreciate that. Is there anything that you think the board can do to help support your work or to help the community better understand the financial need for our district?
Thank you, Jason Getty, for the record. I think there's two primary ways. One is that the document that we talked about tonight at Invest, and helping to communicate that. It's a very good high-level summary. Additionally, the Commission on School Funding has Poonam Mather is our leader from a communications perspective that is working on putting together, I would like to say a one-pager, but I don't think it's going to be a one-pager, but a very high-level document that's a speaking document that they are working on, that they will get to us. I will work with Mr. Story on that. That'll be distributed to you as well, and you'll be able to use that as the platform to speak consistently throughout the state, and all districts will be doing the same to ensure that the message is clear and it's consistent.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. You can get back to me on that, Mr. Gotti. Or we can, you know what, we can come back after public comment too.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and we'll go to public comment. Seeing no other trustees in the queue. Ms. Binder.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. So I don't disagree that we spend a lot of money for that. But what I know I will be advocating for is that legislative audit, because as was just highlighted tonight, the last time that this district was legislatively audited, some of the recommendations, although we were highly acclimated for our Medicaid reimbursement, I have never seen any document in a couple of years, unless I'm completely missing it, where we actually submit to Medicaid for transportation for SPED. Also, you guys are all assuming that these children are getting their services. I've told you, in 3 school years, when I match my own son's service logs with my daily calendar notes from his self-contained teacher, none of the logs match. So either somebody's completely fabricating services. Even one year, remember, the speech lady forgot my son was even on her register and then tried to lie and shove 4 months of minutes into December before the school year ran. So I like to take the step that kids aren't getting the services that they claim that the IEP should be providing, and I can provide much more in-depth examples of failures, as I try to often. But so when we go back to page 13 where we say where the money's spent, when I received through public records request, I believe 2 years of the Medicaid audits per quarter, right? They were given to me for all 4 quarters. There was not a single quarter that we submitted reimbursement more than $1 million, except for maybe 1. So if you add up 4 quarters in 2 fiscal years, we've only requested back nowhere near what the legislature said we exceeded out the best in the country back then 20 years ago at $11 million for 1 fiscal year. So my understanding is to get that reimbursement, we have to have data. We have to show that we're providing services, that there is growth, that there's all these wonderful things. So maybe that's why we're not maximizing these things. So that's why I will heavily advocate for that audit, because if you go through the whole beautiful 95 pages of findings 20 years later, it's very obvious we can use some work. Plus, nobody's looked at it. And then, I mean, maybe I'll hit this in, I'll hit it in 5.
All right, thank you, Ms. Binder. All right, trustees, let me double check. We don't have anyone else. Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you. I do have an answer. I knew I would. Staff, very good. So for the current year, English learners, 63 million, gifted and talented, 3.8 million, and at risk, 51.5 million, for a total of just over 118 million. And then the other piece, I did want to ensure that I'm correct on the record. I cannot recall whether Trustee Garcia Morales asked me Nevada State Bank or Bank of Nevada. We do have something with Bank of Nevada, not Nevada State Bank, and that would be that CD. So I do want to clarify that was the correct piece. And Diane asked me, and I can't remember what you said now, but I just want to make sure I corrected that on the record.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, trustees. I think my only piece, kind of statement more than question, was a plea. I saw that we have about 215 million in carryover. That's money in schools' accounts that is not used. Please, principals, use that money on students and staff. With that, I believe we have Trustee Williams.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the amendment of the final budget 4.03.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustee Garcia Morales.
Second.
All right, trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Williams and a second by Trustee Garcia Morales to adopt the amended final budget. Please cast your votes. Okay, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, trustees. We're moving on to agenda item 4.04. So this is the time to, if you haven't submitted a public speaker card on 4.04, now is the time to do it before we start the agenda item. Trustee Guzman.
Thank you, President Cepeda. I just want to let everyone know that I will be abstaining from this vote because it is an agreement with the ESCA and I work for NSCA. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. All right, we're going to get started on this agenda item. So this is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on discussion of and possible action on approval of the amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement between the Clark County School District and the Education Support Employees Association regarding the provision of improved services. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam President. Nevada Revised Statute 288-153 requires that any new, extended, or modified collective bargaining agreement between a local government employer and an employee organization be approved by the governing body of the local government employer at a public hearing, and that the chief executive officer of the local government shall report to the local government the fiscal impact of that agreement. An amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement between Clark County School District, or CCSD, with the Education Support Employees Association, or ESEA, was approved on November 18th, 2021, regarding improved services, has been drafted and agreed upon by CCSD and ESEA. ESEA and CCSD have drafted an amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement, which modifies language regarding the training of and coverage for first aid safety assistants, or FASAs, and school health assistants, or SHAs. The terms of this agreement will be effective prospectively from the date of approval and signature of this agreement. There is a fiscal impact of $1 million associated with this amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement. This is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on discussion of and possible action on approval of the amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement between the Clark County School District and Education Support Employees Association regarding the provisions of improved services.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Trustees, any discussion? Seeing none, and we do not have any yellow cards. So the public hearing is now closed. Trustees, there we go. I'll entertain a motion here. Trustee Brooks?
Thank you, President Cepeda. I will move to approve agenda item 4.04.
Thank you, Trustee Brooks. Trustee Williams?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Brooks and a second by Trustee Williams. Please cast your votes. Thank you, trustees. Motion passes 6-1-0, noting Trustee Guzman had to abstain. All right, Mr. Hall, I believe we're moving on to 4.05 here. Before I fully open this item, if you would like to provide public comment on 4.05, now is the time to do it. Please submit a yellow card. Otherwise, once we begin the item, we will not be able to take additional public comment. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and read this bit. Now, this is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on discussion of and possible action on approval of the Memorandum of Agreement between the Clark County School District and the Clark County Association of School Administrators and Professional Technical Employees regarding the Summer Learning Program 2023. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. Nevada Revised Statute 288.153 requires that any new, extended, or modified collective bargaining agreement between a local government employer and an employee organization be approved by the governing body of the local government employer, excuse me, at a public hearing, and that the chief executive officer of that local government shall report to the local government the fiscal impact of the agreement. The Board of Trustees of the Clark County School District, or CCSD, approved a negotiated agreement with the Clark County Association of School Administrators and Professional Technical Employees, or CASAPI. An agreement has been reached pending approval by the Board of Trustees and the Superintendent of Schools regarding a memorandum of agreement between CCSD and CASAPI regarding the Summer Learning Program for 2023. CASAPI and CCSD have drafted a new memorandum of agreement which provides for the necessary labor resources for the Summer Learning Program from May 30th, 2023 to June 16th, 2023. The terms of this agreement will be effective prospectively from the date of approval and signature of this agreement. There are additional costs in the amount of approximately $2,016,000 associated with entering into this memorandum of agreement. This is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on discussion of and possible action on approval of the memorandum of agreement between Clark County School District and the Clark County Association of School Administrators and Professional Technical Employees regarding the Summer Acceleration Program for 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Is there any discussion by the board? Seeing none, I also do not have any yellow cards or folks who have signed up ahead of time for public comments. So the public hearing is now closed. We will start with Trustee Williams.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4.05.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustee Brooks.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Brooks. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Williams and a second by Trustee Brooks. Please cast your votes. Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. We're moving on to agenda item 4.06. Again, if you would like to provide public comment on 4.06, now is the time to do so before we get this agenda item rolling. Trustee Guzman.
Thank you, Madam President. I need to abstain from this vote, not because I am in any way affiliated with the Clark County Education Association, but I do have members that are part of their bargaining unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. So this is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on discussion of and possible action on the approval of the memorandum of agreement between the Clark County School District and the Clark County Education Association regarding Summer Learning Program 2023. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. Nevada Revised Statute 288.153 requires that any new extended or modified collective bargaining agreement between a local government employer and an employee organization be approved by the governing body of the local government employer at a public hearing, and that the chief executive officer of the local government shall report to the local government the fiscal impact of that agreement. The Board of Trustees of the Clark County School District, or CCSD, approved a negotiated agreement with the Clark County Clark County Education Association, or CCEA. An agreement has been reached pending approval by the Board of Trustees and the Superintendent of Schools regarding a memorandum of agreement between CCSD and CCEA regarding the Summer Learning Program for 2023. CCEA and CCSD have drafted a new memorandum of agreement which provides for the necessary labor resources for the Summer Learning Program from May 30th, 2023 to June 16th, 2023. The terms of this agreement will be effective prospectively from the date of approval and signature. There are additional costs in the amount of approximately $56 million associated with entering into this memorandum of agreement. This is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on, discussion of, and possible action on the approval of a memorandum of agreement between the Clark County School District and the Clark County Education Association regarding the Summer Learning Program for 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any discussion by the board? Trustee Ford?
I was just going to make the motion to approve the agreement between the CCSD and the Clark County. Oh my gosh, where is it at? Yeah, CCEA. I lost the item. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll just move to approve this item. 4.06.
Let me just quickly say that we do not have any yellow cards or folks who have signed up ahead of time for this item, so the public hearing is now closed. Thank you, Trustee Ford, for your motion. Trustee Williams?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Ford and a second by Trustee Williams to approve agenda item 4.06. Please cast your votes. Okay, motion passes 6-1-0, noting Trustee Guzman must abstain. With that, we will move on to 4.07. Again, this is the time. If you'd like to speak on 4.07, please submit your public hearing, your yellow public speaker card before we fully get rolling here. Trustee Guzman.
Thank you. I will be abstaining again because it is an agreement with the ESEA, which is part of NSCA.
Thank you, Trustee Guzman. All right, I don't see anyone rushing up for yellow cards, so we will go ahead and move on to this item. Let's see. I will how to read this bit. This is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on discussion of and possible action on the approval of the new memorandum of agreement between the Clark County School District and the Education Support Employees Association regarding the movement of certain positions to 12-month contracts. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. Nevada Revised Statute NRS .153 requires that any new, extended, or modified collective bargaining agreement between a local government and employer and an employee organization be approved by the governing body of the local government employer at a public hearing, and that the chief executive officer of the local government shall report to the local government the fiscal impact of that agreement. The Board of Trustees of the Clark County School District, or CCSD, approved a negotiated agreement with the Education Support Employees Association, or ESEA. An agreement has been reached pending approval by the Board of Trustees and the Superintendent of Schools regarding a memorandum of agreement between CCSD and ESEA regarding 12-month positions for certain support staff members. ESEA and CCSD drafted a new memorandum of agreement which provides that the positions of school office manager, as assigned to elementary schools, and administrative school secretary, as assigned to secondary schools, will be changed to 12-month positions. The terms of this agreement will be effective prospectively from the date of the approval and signature. There are additional costs of approximately $2 million associated with entering into this memorandum of agreement. This is the time and place to conduct a public hearing on, discussion of, and possible action on approval of the new memorandum of agreement between the Clark County School District and the Education Support Employees Association regarding 12-month employment terms.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any discussion by the board? Trustee Cavazos?
Thank you, Madam President. Just for, to answer an inquiry from the public, would this be mandatory for all office managers, or would they have a choice to remain 11-month or to go to 12-month?
That is not,
Mr. Hall?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara, Trustee Cavazos, that is not mentioned in the MOA specifically at this time.
That's why I said that it was an inquiry from the public for their clarification. I thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no additional, I'm assuming y'all are trying to make a motion, right? Okay. I just so folks know, we do not have any yellow cards, nor have any folks signed up ahead of time. So the public hearing is now closed. Trustee Williams.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt item 4.07.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. Trustee Garcia Morales.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. Trustees, we have a motion by Trustee Williams and a second by Trustee Garcia Morales to approve agenda item 4.07. Please cast your vote. Okay, motion passes 6-1-0, noting Trustee Guzman must abstain. With that, we will move on to agenda item 5.01, public comment. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Public comment on items not listed as action items on the agenda. Again, if you have public comment for this item, please make sure to provide it to our staff here before we fully get this item rolling. We have two folks who have signed up ahead of time, and I do have yellow cards. Ms. Yamamoto, I have your card.
My name is Yumi Yamamoto. I was commenting on I wanted to comment on the career and technical academies, and then, the dropout with the kids that are going to these career and technical academies. Both my sons went to Hyde Park, and right now both my sons go to West Tech. I have two kids. One has ADHD, one doesn't. For a parent, it's scary to have a kid in that type of environment. I have one son who's doing well. They both score very well. They have all the star ratings, but it's the teacher that makes the difference. You have these teachers that have academic hazing, which basically is like not even wanting to teach the kids. They're more teaching about timelines, deadlines. This is important. You must get it in 3 days, 5 days. Not that they understand the concept. I just got into it with one of the teachers at West Career Technical Academy with regards to hazing my son, who has ADHD, is under a 504 plan, had COVID, and they have no policy in place on having him being able to make up the work. So now he's just discouraged. He's a good kid. He makes good grades. He scores well. But you wonder why these career and technical academies don't want kids there. Parents don't want their kids there. It's because of teachers like that. They have to start addressing and making it about the children, not about timeline, about learning. She actually emailed me instructions on how to teach my kid versus her teaching my kid. And I'm just like, I don't know what else to do. He was gone for a week. He has ADHD. You can't even set a child up for success. Yet, he scores a 1230 on his pre-SATs. He's a bright kid. But she's setting him up for failure because all it is about timelines and deadlines and being rigorous. That's what it shouldn't be about. It should be about educating a child. So that's all I have to say. If they want kids to enroll and to be a part of career and technical academies, they have to have some flexibility. These are kids that are not only gifted, but they also have other things that they have to worry about, stresses, being able to work, provide for their families, or, you know, contribute to the families. They have extracurricular sports where they're trying to compete to be in an elite and move to the next level. Yet if it's based off of timelines, they're never going to be able to do it. It should be based on teaching them. And that's the importance of it. So when you wonder why kids and we don't succeed as a school district, especially with these PAs and all these magnet programs, it's because of that, not having that type of support for a child and flexibility. Because that's what it really takes. You want a well-rounded child, you're never going to get one if you're only focusing on deadline. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yamamoto. We have two folks who signed up ahead of time. Janet Crosswhite. After Ms. Crosswhite, we have Mr. James Bayless.
Good evening, Madam President, Superintendent Dr. Jara, and members of the board. My name is Janet Crosswhite. I am a licensed registered public health dental hygienist. I am the CEO of Heavenly Smiles Mobile Dental, LLC, and the program director of Smiles Across Nevada, a 501c3, which is a nonprofit organization located here in Southern Nevada area. We have a mobile dental van with security cameras where we bring access to diagnostic and preventative dental care for our children and community members in Southern Nevada to help break barriers such as transportation availability, parents' work schedules, and or understanding the importance of good oral health. Our goal is to partner with CCSD to provide CCSD students the opportunity to obtain preventative services by way of dental cleanings, fluoride varnish applications, sealant applications to help prevent dental caries, which are cavities, and necessary referrals. Our goal is to help keep our children safe by bridging the gap between dental diseases and systemic illnesses. By providing these services during school hours when available, we can help prevent missed school days and minimize dental pain. This will allow the students to gain confidence and focus on learning. For the past 2 years, we have been in communication with the CCSD Health Services Office, and on 2 separate occasions, we were told that we can come in and provide these services. We are asking for help in getting our MOA approved to obtain these services to our at-risk children. Communities and schools, as well as CCSD administrators, have reached out to us for help. We're currently servicing children in local charter schools and with the help of our community partner referrals. We are fully licensed, bonded, and insured with the requirements per CCSD risk management. We are cooperative and excited about this opportunity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Crosswhite. Mr. Bayless?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Dr. Jara. So I just want to say, I guess, farewell so much to Ms. Ford. You're always going to be missed. It's always a pleasure to come up here and see you. Ms. Cepeda, it's always been a pleasure picking on you. It's been an interesting saga. I'm not just quite sure why you'd never addressed my son's arrest that your school did. We were 3 years. But I guess, you're getting out of here, so who cares? So the situation is, my son, since August 25th, when I addressed this board about the attendance and grades, they pulled him out. Are you aware that August 25th, when they pulled him out, was a violation of the very due process that I was in? You know, the agreement? If you pulled him out illegally and I was working with Mr. Becerras, you violated the extra minutes, didn't you? So that's a violation of the very court order that the ink didn't even dry. So somebody might want to address that. The factor is I hear a lot of money for the SPED program. You got it for the year. So where's my kid's money? He was there for the tally. So where's his part? You guys pulled him out. So who kept that money? Where is it? The factor is my kid's a SPED student. I've been going around and around with you guys, and you guys illegally took him out. Child Services agreed. They even agreed that it was a violation of the court order. That's how I found out about it. They let me know. So the factor is we're in a due process and you illegally withdraw a SPED kid, but you got this man talking about ass loads of money for the SPED program. Where's my kid? You guys are, like this says, we all grow together. So if my kid's academic is dying, does that mean you guys die too? If we're all growing together, then shouldn't we all die together? You guys have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Bayless. Ms. Anna Binder?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jura. I'm going to say what I'm going to say without saying any names, but I think everyone will know what I'm talking about. But tonight, a particular employment contract was shoved up into the consent agenda instead of maybe potentially being on a business item like it probably should have been because it's for an executive cabinet member. But I did also want to highlight that something else that I will super be advocating for. So you guys all know we've been doing the Time for 20 because we've been looking at like New Mexico and other states doing amazing things for our educators. I'm actually going to up the ante because since he was terminated and brought back and the entire executive cabinet got those raises, tonight with that other contract, it equates to in 1 year a 31.2% raise. And now there's this beautiful language on page 3 of 5, paragraph 8. The superintendent may grant an increase in compensation in any 1 year based upon the job performance of the employee. So you guys just got taken out of being able to have any say in that. But if we can do that in 1 year for one executive cabinet employee, we can do that for our educators, and they dang well deserve it. So I won't mess up the hashtag because we have quite a little following on that, but please know when you hear me say time for 20, I mean time for 31.2% to be exact. Also, something that was really interesting that I thought is there's some language in here like you don't like your employer, blah, 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 whatever. But last time I checked, you work for who pays your salary, not the person who doesn't even live in our state. So I'm kind of seeing a flaw in some loyalty. But, who cares? I also noticed in purchase awards, there's a particular person who got just shy of that $50,000 mark again for some employment services. And we've paid this particular person one other time this year. So that now pushes it up over the $50,000 limit. And I'm not quite sure how that happens. But again, if these are unskilled employment opportunities in the office of the superintendent, lots of people probably would love to have those jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. Regina Sanders?
Madam President, and to the board and all that I know to call and don't call, thank you for this opportunity. I'm here on behalf of my granddaughter who attends J.D. Smith Middle School. We have had bullies there at that school that has been doing the same thing all year long, hurting other students, bringing family members up to the school, to attack other students and just get suspended and go back to school the next day. So they don't feel like that's a harsh punishment. They don't feel like that, that's that being suspended from school for a day or two is worth their education because they're coming back to school, hurting our students and doing the same thing. On November the 18th, my granddaughter was attacked by a family of 5, and this family, this young lady was suspended during the early part of the morning. She was suspended, and then later on that evening after school, as my granddaughter and her friend was walking home, she brought 5 to 6 family members up there to attack her. My granddaughter ended up having to go to the hospital. This is the kind of stuff that really upsets me because students can come and attack students and know that they're going to get suspended and go right back to school, do the same thing, hurt somebody else. And I know this is not only going on at J.D. Smith. I know that this is going on in other schools. So I'm pleading to the board to impose stiffer punishment for this type of behavior, and let's try to put a stop to these type of people coming into our schools, hurting our kids, disrupting the classroom, not following school rules, and think they can just get away with anything and then just come back and everything is okay. I'm asking the school board, what can you do about things like this? And can you impose stiffer policy so that these people don't have the opportunity to hurt our students, get suspended for a day or two, come back and do the same thing? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Brandon Summers? After Mr. Summers, we'll have Ms. Jessica Jones.
All right. Greetings, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jara. For the record, my name is Brandon Summers. I'm a Las Vegas native, CCSD alum. I've been a substitute teacher with the district for 5 years. I've worked as a vacancy sub on several occasions, and I currently sub on a day-to-day basis. First of all, I want to extend a special thank you to Trustee Cavazos, Trustees Ford, for being tireless advocates for students, teachers, and staff. Though Trustee Ford will not be returning to serve another term on the board, I'm forever grateful for her voice and her fearlessness in speaking the truth. I wish her all the best in her future endeavors. Next, everyone should be aware of the ongoing staffing crisis at schools. There are not enough teachers on campus. Schools cannot and should not continue employing the strategy of forcing licensed teachers to sell preps. It is not sustainable, and this will push more teachers out of the profession. The increase in pay for subs at Title I, Tier 1 schools was a smart move. However, CCSD needs to revisit the substitute pay structure as a whole, and the future of sub compensation should include health insurance, PTO, and retirement benefits. Schools are desperate for subs, and that is reflected by the daily bombardment emails I get in both my school and personal email. Lastly, it's time to do something about this new public comment format. There was nothing wrong with how things were before, but there was rather an unwillingness from board leadership to enforce rules and exercise authority. If we've gone out of our way to be here, we deserve to have our faces shown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Ms. Jones?
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara. I'm here today because I wanted to speak about the school-based health clinic at Bailey Middle School. So I wanted to put into public record how grateful and appreciative I am to this board, and especially you, Dr. Jara, because this health clinic reopening is serving students in a very high needs area. And it's open right now 2 days a week. It's providing chronic care support, behavioral health referrals, and other important services to students in our area. We've waited a really long time to get this health clinic open. To put it into perspective, next January will be 4 years since Hickey, Bailey, and Sunrise all met together the first time to try to figure out a way we could reopen this health clinic after it closed down. Hold on. All right. Currently, services are limited, and the clinic is only serving Bailey students at this time. And while that's not initially what we had hoped for, it is doing so much good for the students at Bailey and in the community. So this board has done everything that they've needed to do. Expanding the services to other schools in our area is now dependent on NSHE. So again, that being said, I want to reiterate that the work this board did, and you too, Dr. Jara, in having this health clinic get open is incredibly important. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Have a good night and a good rest of the year, because it's almost break.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Ms. Vicki Cridell?
Vicki Cridell, for the record, president of NIAA of Southern Nevada and reading teacher, grades 1 to 5. So your educators have tried to be patient. We stayed even when things seemed impossible. We've pushed through the hard days because we care about the students and our schools. This year has proven that leadership in CCSD will not address the issues that are hurting educators the most. Tonight, we've come together to provide a list. I went online, I asked people to submit, I emailed each of you quotes from the actual educators. I won't be doing that in my testimony, but you have it. I have 15 reasons why teachers are not staying in CCSD or planning to leave now. Number one, pay that isn't keeping up with inflation. Number two, healthcare that is often still unaffordable. Educators are going without treatments because they can't afford it. Number three, the new grading system is making educators' jobs increasingly more difficult. Students across the district are taking advantage of it. Allowing students to pass with very little effort is not setting them up to succeed in the workforce. Number four, student behaviors are out of control across the district. The restorative justice facade doesn't help. Students are struggling with behavior, they're struggling with mental health, and we have no support to offer them. Educators do not feel safe in their schools, and neither do the students. Number five, the workloads are excessive and often unreasonable. Number six, class sizes are often unmanageable, and having no subs is making it worse. Over-testing is number seven. Many teachers told me that they spend weeks and weeks and weeks preparing for MAPS testing, preparing for SBAC. They're losing important instructional time. Number eight, the sub shortage is adding a huge additional burden to all educators. Some educators are forced to sell their prep multiple times a week, some every day. They're getting no preps, and all that work has to be done at home. Number nine, some administrators are either creating or allowing hostile school cultures to fester. Number 10, educators are not treated like respected professionals. Number 11, our sick days are being tied to our personal days is unfair, especially during COVID. Educators that have children have no chance of getting any personal days because they're using all their sick days when they're sick or their kids are sick. Number 12, parents have become increasingly more frustrated. Educators are often the first line of defense against these angry parents. Number 13, SPED IEPs are not always being complied with by schools, and administrators are doing nothing about it.
Thank you, Ms. Cardell. Jamie Trudinsky?
I'm not usually dressed like an elf, but it's Spirit Week, so I did take off the bells, though. I wanted to speak earlier about the presentation with AP and CTE and IB, but I got here 2 minutes after the presentation started and could not speak, so I'm going to share that now. So I teach an AP course. I've taught an AP course for 8 years. I actually brought the course to Valley 8 years ago, AP Human Geography. And in 2020, Canyon Springs was the only high school in the state of Nevada to apply and be approved to a program called AP with We service. So those students who I had as freshmen who are now seniors are the only students in Nevada who are going to graduate this year with a transcript that has AP with We service on it. And that's already netting several of them scholarships and college offers because they participated in that program as a freshman. I would love to see that program expand. It's not for all AP courses yet, but many AP courses offer that AP with We training. Right before the pandemic hit, College Board actually flew me up to Seattle to give a presentation because the program that I had implemented in my AP courses was so successful. There are a lot of misconceptions about AP courses, however, and I think there's definitely an equity issue that we struggle with in the district. Paying teachers for scores is absolute garbage because there's just an inequity that's going to exist there. There's always going to be students who have more resources and more opportunities that are put other students at a disadvantage. And it's not fair to tie student scores or teacher scores to where a student's zip code may be and what opportunities they might have. Another issue that I want to bring to the attention is a friend of mine who has taught in CCSD for 21 years, teaches AP Art History, and she was denied CUs for tutoring AP Art History, and the reasoning that she was denied the CUs was that it's not a core class. So she was denied, even though she spent hours tutoring, and had it been AP Government or AP US History or AP Lit, she would have gotten those CUs for tutoring, but because the district deemed it wasn't a core class, she was denied those CUs. All right, so what is going to make teachers want to teach that? What is going to make students want to teach that when you're told that your work is not good enough compared to another course? And transportation is still a huge equity issue. I have students in my magnet program who are leaving, not because they don't like the program, but because they get to school 50 minutes late every day. And they cannot be successful in an AP course when they are missing 80% of the content every day. And if we don't fix the transportation issues in the district, we're going to continue to lose kids from these programs that they deserve to be in because of transportation issues.
Thank you, Jamie. Sorry, I almost slipped up with pronouns. Apologies. Ed Gonzalez, followed by Diana Batista.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Jar, members of the board. Ed Gonzalez for the record, community member at Hickey Elementary, but speaking as an individual. Before I get started, I want to thank the service of Trustee Ford and President Cepeda. It is very difficult to run for school board. There is no great desire to sit on a board and watch the public constantly come up here, especially during COVID, and scream and yell at you to the point where security needs to be called in and throw people out of the room. It is one of the most difficult jobs to sit on. And I will say, Dr. Jar, former Governor Brian Sandoval said that the job of superintendent is much harder than the job as governor. So I do appreciate everybody who works in education. We all have the same goals to make kids' lives better. And so this isn't just to you, Trustee Ford, or to you, President Cepeda. It's to every member of the board. It's tough to put your name in a hat and run for election. But I did come here to speak about Bailey Middle School's health clinic. The health clinic was open at the end of October or early September. I think it was in the final week of August. And we wanted to have a nice big celebration, Dr. Jar. So I know how much work you put into it and your staff, but it only served at that moment Bailey Middle School. And so my chair of our SOT, Jessica Jones, has spoke, we wanted to make sure it served not only just Hickey and Sunrise Mountain with the schools on the same block, but also like Helen Hurd Elementary or Brockman Elementary as well in the community. So we know the mission's not accomplished, but the only reason we bring it up today is that this board has done its job. It took a long time to get that MOA agreement with NSHE, and we all know what's going on, whether at NSHE, we're on our third chancellor since we've had these conversations. When we talk about moving to the next step, it's very difficult when we have such transition, at least on that side of it. And so we are committed at Hickey, speaking as an individual, of course, to have continued conversations about this, because if it's difficult enough to get one health clinic, and the original plan was to open the original MOA was over at Martinez Elementary. These are reopening health clinics in the past that have been shut down. But I know the idea is to get more health clinics, Dr. Jar, but this is a notoriously slow process. And I'm going to highlight at least, and I brought a prop, and this is where I'm sad that I'm not on camera, but I'll live with it. This is the flyer that sits in Bailey Middle School's office, and it says at the very bottom, services provided for Bailey Middle School students only. And the reason I want to highlight that is that there was something that you guys talked about in the INVEST program. And I'll read that section very briefly since I'm short on time. You want to invest in school safety measures, including psychologists, nurses, and community health workers. It is very difficult to do that when we don't get these agreements in place and the services fully provided. Like I said, we met in January. That was the month that Governor Sisolak was inaugurated. Most of this board was not on this board at this time where it just started. So we must continue the mission, and I hope in any way, Dr. Jar, the staff and the trustees, if we can help, we will be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Diana Batista?
Hi, Diana Batista for the record. I also want to thank you. I know I think your last day when I saw the thing today. So thank you so much for your time here for, I think, 4 years. You made it 4 years. So that's incredible to even make it 1 year through this. And I can tell you somebody who's misbehaved a few times. So the other thing I do want to talk about is I know that as a board, you guys can't take action on non-action, but as a superintendent, you can under operations. Something I have found, in advocacy, most of my kids are pre-K, elementary, middle, by high school, they kind of figured it out and they don't need an advocate anymore, and I celebrate that every day. I can tell you as a parent that is going through my first senior, I didn't know a lot about the college. It wasn't really explained to me in freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And so I didn't know that, like, maybe scholarships, should have started junior year, summer of junior year. None of that was explained to me. My son got an acceptance letter to his first choice college, so I'm super excited about that. He will get a waiver for his merit, just based on grades and everything, which is incredible for a previously self-contained nonverbal student to get that far. The reality is, for many of our kids, it's going to cost my son probably twice as much as a typical student, only because he's got to have unlimited meal plans because of the sensory issues. He's not going to eat maybe what some of the other kids might. He's going to need a dorm room that's private. Because he's still STEMs at 17 years old, and he needs to not be able to distract other students, things like that, and that costs more money. And so I just wish that these things would have been explained at maybe his IEPs, and I think that that's something that's really important. Freshman, junior, sophomore year explained ahead of time so that he knows junior year when it comes. He's doing that maybe, throughout the summers and stuff. And I just think that's really important if that's not been looked into. I think it's really important to have at every single IEP meeting, those discussions from your teams, freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And I would appreciate that. I just think it's something to look into if that's not been explained. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Batista. Right, trustees, that is the last public comment card. And folks who have signed up ahead of time, I have a announce. I'm assuming y'all are seeking to make an adjourn. Are you trying to adjourn us? Okay. We do. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6.01, our upcoming meeting announcement. The upcoming meeting of the Board of Trustees is Tuesday, January 3rd. That's an exciting one. We'll be here in the boardroom. Okay.
Madam President.
Trustee Garcia Morales.
Thank you. I am very grateful for just a moment from the board. This is tradition. Every time there is transition on the board, the School Board of Trustees has, I'd like to recognize our colleagues who are not going to be returning with us in January. So Trustee Ford, Trustee Cepeda, on behalf of the School Board Trustees, thank you for your commitment to our community, your service and your sacrifice to our school district. We have, please accept a small token of our appreciation. And we have cards that have been signed by all trustees as well. I'm incredibly grateful for your leadership and support of students in our school district. Don't want to put you on the spot. In the event you'd like to share a couple of words, we would be welcome. And if not, that's okay. The words sure will.
Thank you.
Sentiments.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. Superintendent?
I do want to make a comment, Madam President, members of the board. I think Ed Gonzalez left, but I don't think I have the toughest job. I think being an elected official is tougher. Put your name out there is difficult. So kudos to all of you, to you, Trustee Cepeda and Trustee Ford, for your commitment and leadership for our children.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Ford, any comments?
I didn't prepare any comments. I'll just say that this has been a wonderful experience, a humongous learning experience. A lot of things I wasn't prepared for, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to seeing all the work that the 5 of you and the new trustees accomplish. I'm excited to continue being part of the conversation about education in Nevada. And I'm going to be honest, it's been real and it's been fun, but it hasn't been real fun. But I wish you the best, everybody, and really love the staff and the students in the district. So I will continue watching and advocating as much as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. I'd like to echo very similar comments. At moments, it's not a whole lot of fun. I think at the end of the day, it definitely doesn't feel like a goodbye. I know we both do a lot of advocacy work, and we work a lot in education, so it just feels like we're just reshifting energies, and at the end of the day, we all really care about advancing our students, advancing this district, advancing equity, making sure that no one is that every kid has a proper education. So thank you all so much for your kind words. Thank you for these multiple years of service. And I think, Trustee Williams, are you trying to adjourn us? Okay, Trustee Williams. Because we also monitor the time we spend on student-centered outcomes, and you're eating into our time.
I am
like this is counting against our student-centered outcomes.
I am so sorry. No, I just wanted to say I'm glad that I got to meet both of you, and while we didn't always get along, that I think towards the end of this year, this board got to a point where we could do a lot of good work for student-centered outcomes. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone, please. Actually, Trustee Ford, would you like to make an adjournment and us?
Forgive me, I have one more announcement.
Oh, okay.
Before Trustee Ford.
The last.
One more tradition. So it is also tradition to honor and recognize our president at the end of her term. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I'll accept you because yes, you too. But on behalf of the Board of Trustees, President Cepeda, thank you so much for your leadership during a critical time on our board. Your commitment to the students in our district will not be forgotten. We've got one more token of appreciation for you, as you to remember your term as president of the school board. It is a triangle.
A triangle. I love triangles. It's my favorite shape.
It's actually a prism, more specific. The triangle shape, it is the strongest shape in the of all shapes, and it kind of it's important to recognize that the strength that you brought to this role is critical and appreciated. Tremendous.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia Morales. I do enjoy triangles. I have one tattooed on myself as well, because it is the strongest shape. A nice reminder. But thank you again. Fun time being president. Again, not always, but here we are, and the work continues. Trustee Ford, would you like to adjourn us? Trustee Ford?
I would like to move to adjourn forever.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. And I will second forever. All right, trustees, we have a motion to second. Tacos. Please cast your votes, trustees. Oh, Trustee Ford, you had to vote. Thank you, trustees. Motion passes 7-0. It's been a ride. Thank you all so much for your time commitment to be here. Again, the work continues.